Hey friends! Glad you're here at DC Harry. We've cooked up something special. Green Lantern Corps recruited Harry age 6 and Willpower ring fused with Elder Wand creating chaos. Liking and subscribing really helps us out. Okay, story time. Chapter 1, The ring finds its lantern. The cupboard under the stairs at number 4, Privet Drive was exactly 32 inches wide at its broadest point. Harry Potter knew this because he had measured it, first with his hands, then with a piece of string he'd found in the garden, then with a ruler he'd borrowed from Dudley's room while Dudley was downstairs watching cartoons. He'd measured it 3 times, on 3 different days, because measuring things was something to do. Because doing things was better than just lying in the dark listening to the house breathe around him. He was 6 years old. He had a scar on his forehead shaped like a bolt of lightning. He had his mother's eyes, which he knew because Mrs. Fig next door had told him once, in a voice that carried something sad in it that she probably hadn't meant for him to hear. He had a cousin who was twice his size and half as quiet, an aunt who cleaned things with a kind of fury that seemed personal, and an uncle whose neck went red in a very specific way that meant Harry should stop existing in whatever room he was currently in. He had the cupboard. He had the string. He had, tucked under the thin mattress that smelled faintly of motor oil, a library book about stars that he'd checked out 3 weeks ago and was supposed to have returned but hadn't, because he hadn't finished it yet and the pictures were extraordinary. Whole galaxies rendered in Hubble photographs, colors that didn't have proper names yet, distances so vast they stopped being numbers and became something more like feelings. He fell asleep most nights thinking about distance. He was thinking about it now, the Andromeda Galaxy, specifically, which was 2.5 million light-years away and on a collision course with the Milky Way, which sounded terrifying but apparently wasn't going to happen for another 4 billion years, which was both reassuring and somehow lonely, when the ring found him. It didn't knock. It didn't announce itself. What happened was that a very faint green light appeared at the gap under the cupboard door, thin as a thread, and Harry watched it the way he watched most things in his life, carefully, and without moving, because moving drew attention and attention was rarely good. The light thickened. Then the door swung open on its own, and standing in the hallway of number 4, Privet Drive, backlit by the orange glow of the street lamp outside the front window, was a man in a bomber jacket holding what appeared to be a glowing green ring at arm's length. The ring was pointed directly at Harry. The man stared at it. Then at Harry. Then at the ring again. He had the look of someone whose evening had taken a turn he hadn't planned for. "Huh," he said. Harry sat up. He looked at the ring. He looked at the man. "Is that mine?" he asked. The man blinked. What? The ring." Harry nodded at it. "Is that for me?" "It's pointing at me." "It is pointing at you," the man agreed, in the tone of someone who was still processing the pointing. "It's, yeah. That's the thing I need to talk to you about, buddy." "My name is Harry," Harry said. "Not buddy." The man looked at him for a moment. Something in his expression shifted, not softened, exactly, more like it recalibrated. "Harry," he said. "Right. Mine's Hal. Hal Jordan." He glanced up at the ceiling, then back down. Is there a grown-up here I should be talking to?" "My aunt and uncle are upstairs," Harry said. "But they'll be angry if they wake up and you're here." He considered this. "They'll probably be angry anyway. They're often angry." Hal Jordan looked at the cupboard. He looked at the thin mattress and the string and the library book and the way Harry was sitting with his knees pulled up because there wasn't quite enough room to stretch out fully. He looked at the padlock on the outside of the door that Harry hadn't mentioned because it was just a fact of the cupboard, like the 32-inch width, not something that required comment. The look on Hal Jordan's face when he saw the padlock was interesting. It wasn't pity, exactly. It was something harder than pity. "No," Hal said, and his voice had changed. "I don't think I need to talk to your aunt and uncle, actually." He crouched down so he was at Harry's eye level. "I need to talk to you." The ring, it's been scanning for candidates for about 6 months. It's a Green Lantern ring. You know what that is? Harry had read about Green Lanterns. Not in any book he'd been given, in a comic that Dudley had thrown at his head in a failed attempt to hit him with it. Harry had kept the comic. "They're space police," he said. "They make things out of light." "More or less," Hal said. "The ring chooses people. It scans for willpower, genuine, bone deep, won't quit willpower, and when it finds somebody with enough of it, it chooses them." He paused. "It's been in this neighborhood for 6 months, Harry. It went past every adult on this street. Every adult in the surrounding area. And it ended up here." Another pause. "Under the stairs." Harry looked at the ring. It was still glowing, a warm, insistent green, the color of deep forest or of traffic lights at 3 in the morning when you're the only one on the road. There was something about it that felt like recognition, not of the object itself but of something in it, as though it were a question he already knew the answer to. "Can I hold it?" he asked. Hal opened his mouth, probably to say something about protocols or safety or minimum age requirements. The ring apparently didn't care about any of those things, because it left Hal's hand entirely and floated the 3 feet across the cupboard and settled onto Harry's right index finger before anyone had agreed to anything. The green light didn't just come from the ring then. It came from Harry. Not in a violent way, nothing exploded, nothing shook. It was more like watching someone walk into a room they'd never been in before and immediately know which chair was theirs. The light settled around Harry like it had always been there and had just been waiting for the right moment to be visible. Harry looked at his hand. He turned it over. He made a fist and the light intensified, and without quite deciding to do it he thought about the Andromeda Galaxy, those colors without names, that impossible blue-white core, and a small, perfect construct of a spiral galaxy materialized above his palm, rotating slowly, every arm rendered an accurate proportion. Hal Jordan sat down on the hallway floor. "Okay," he said, to no one in particular. "Okay. So. That's a thing." "It does what I think of," Harry said. It wasn't a question. "Essentially," Hal said. "It runs on willpower. The stronger your will, the more complex and durable the constructs. Most new recruits can make basic shapes their first week. A cube. Maybe a wall." He gestured at the rotating galaxy above Harry's palm. "Not that. I've been thinking about it for a while," Harry said. "The galaxy. I've been reading about it." He looked at Hal. "What happens now?" Hal rubbed his face with both hands. He had the air of a man who had recruited new Green Lanterns before and found them variously terrifying, infuriating, or both, and was currently revising his personal scale. "Normally," he said, "normally, we find an adult. We have a conversation with the family, but." He looked at the padlock again, and his jaw tightened. "I'm going to need to make some calls." "To the space police?" Harry asked. "To the space police," Hal confirmed, with a gravity that suggested he understood completely how ridiculous that sentence was. Harry's galaxy continued to turn above his palm. He watched it, and the thing that had been living in his chest since he could remember, the thing that wasn't quite loneliness but was adjacent to it, the sense of pressing against a wall from the inside, went quiet. Not because it was solved, but because a 6-year-old who measures his cupboard with string and reads about galaxies to feel less small had just been told, in the most concrete possible way, that there was more out there than the 32-inch width of a space under some stairs. "Hal," Harry said. "How far away is OA?" "About 52,000 light-years from here," Hal said. Harry nodded seriously. "Further than Andromeda?" "Yeah." "Good," Harry said. And he meant it. The conversation with Vernon Dursley happened at 6:15 in the morning, because Hal Jordan had decided that waiting until a reasonable hour would involve leaving Harry in the cupboard for several more hours, and he had some fairly strong feelings about that. Vernon came downstairs in his dressing gown, saw a stranger in his hallway with a glowing green ring, and his face cycled through approximately 4 colors before settling on a deep, dangerous purple. He drew breath for what was clearly going to be a speech of considerable volume. "Mr. Dursley," Hal said, in the quiet, pleasant voice of a man who had negotiated with aliens who breathed methane and found most human conversations comparatively easy, "I'm here about Harry. I'm a representative of an interplanetary peacekeeping organization, and we'd like your permission to take custody of him for an extended training period." He smiled. It was a very specific kind of smile, the kind that acknowledged this was a request but contained, in its architecture, the clear understanding that it was also not really a request. Vernon stared at him. He stared at Harry, who was standing in the hallway in his 2 large pajamas with a glowing ring on his finger. He stared at the ring. His face performed another color transition. "You can," Hal continued, pleasantly, "say no. In which case I'll be filing several reports with several agencies, some of which are not exactly terrestrial, but a few of which are very much on this planet and would have significant interest in the living arrangements of a minor. Or," he let the smile widen just slightly, "you can sign the paperwork, and we'll be out of your hair by 7. There was a very long silence. "We'd need it in writing," Vernon said, in a voice that had lost most of its breath, "that he's someone else's responsibility." "Already drafted," Hal said, and produced a folder. It took 4 minutes. Harry went back into the cupboard to get the library book about the stars. He stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at the thin mattress and the piece of string and the ruler he'd borrowed and never returned to Dudley's room. He felt something, standing there, not grief, exactly, not at 6 years old when you don't yet have the vocabulary for what should have been given to you that wasn't. Something more like finality. He took the book. He left the string. OA was not what Harry had imagined, which was impressive, because he had imagined quite a lot. He'd imagined something like the deep space photographs in his library book, vast and cold and colored in impossible blues and golds. What he got was something that managed to be all of those things while also being profoundly, almost aggressively busy. The planet sat at the center of the universe, or near enough to the center that the distinction was academic, and it had the energy of something that knew it. Towers of green-veined stone rose from a landscape that looked carved rather than grown, angular and deliberate, and everywhere there were lanterns, moving between the towers, sparring in open training grounds, sitting in groups that Harry would have called clusters because they reminded him of the star formations in his book, bright concentrated points of wool surrounded by the dark. His ring translated everything, which was extraordinary in itself. He stood on a landing platform approximately 800 feet above the planet's surface and listened to 17 different languages fold themselves, one by one, into English inside his ear, and thought, this is what being read to must feel like, if you've never been read to. Kilowog found him there. Kilowog was, by most measurements, enormous. He was also pink, in the way that granite sometimes had pink in it, not delicate, nothing delicate about Kilowog, but a warm, earthy rose red in the skin that Harry noticed before he noticed the tusks or the size or the fists that were approximately the same dimensions as Harry's entire head. He stood over Harry with the specific patience of a drill sergeant who had seen every variety of new recruit terror and had developed, over centuries of practice, a face that communicated this efficiently. "You're the kid," Kilowog said. "Yes," Harry said. 6 years old. "Yes. Ring chose you." This was stated rather than asked. "Yes." Kilowog crouched down. He examined Harry with the thoroughness of someone assessing structural integrity. "Make me something," he said. Harry thought for a moment. Then he made a construct of OA itself, a small, accurate model of the planet as seen from approach, the towers visible as tiny spires, the atmospheric layers rendered in their actual colors. He held it out on his palm. Kilowog looked at it for a long time. "Where'd you get the approach data?" "From the ring," Harry said. "It has everything in its memory." "I just looked." "Most new recruits don't think to look in the ring's memory," Kilowog said. "Not for months." Harry lowered the construct. "Was that wrong?" "No," Kilowog said. He straightened up. It was right. Being right in ways nobody expected is going to be your whole thing, isn't it? It wasn't a question either. He turned and started walking toward the training grounds. Come on, then. Harry followed. Are you going to train me? I train everyone, Kilowog said, without looking back. Try to keep up, Puzzer. Harry had no idea what a Puzzer was, but the ring translated it as something between rookie and small one, with a secondary connotation closer to little troublemaker, and he decided he didn't mind it at all. Training was not what Harry expected, either. He had expected, in the back of his mind where the Dursley-shaped thoughts lived, something punishing. Something that would take the ring away and tell him he wasn't enough after all. Something that would measure him and find him 32 inches too narrow. What he got was Kilowog shouting at him constantly, and it was the best thing that had ever happened to him. Not because Kilowog was gentle, he wasn't, even slightly. He was demanding and precise and had absolutely no interest in making Harry feel comfortable about failure. But the shouting was consistent. It applied to everyone equally. When Harry's constructs destabilized under pressure in that first week, Kilowog didn't look disappointed in him specifically. He looked at the destabilized construct the way a craftsman looks at a joint that needs resetting, clinically, with attention, with interest in the fix rather than the flaw. Your problem, Kilowog told him, during the third day, is you're thinking too hard about what you're making. You're in your head about the shape. What's the shape for? Harry was attempting to maintain a construct barrier while simultaneously being pelted by training drones, small, buzzing things that stung rather than damaged, like green plastic hornets. Protecting me, he said, through gritted teeth. From what? From the drones. Not good enough. Kilowog hit the barrier with a construct of his own and it shattered. Harry took 3 stings in rapid succession. Try again. What's the barrier for? 4. Harry rebuilt it, faster this time, and caught a drone before it could complete its arc, 4 giving me time to think. Better. The barrier held against Kilowog's second hit. Everything you make with the ring is an extension of your intention. Not your thought. Your intention. Why do you want time to think? Because I want to figure out the right next thing. And what's the right next thing right now? Harry looked at the drones. There were 11 of them. He looked at the training ground, at the geometry of the space, at where Kilowog was standing. He dissolved the barrier entirely, dropped flat, and sent a single looping construct around the outer edge of the training ground that collected all 11 drones like a net and held them 3 feet above the ground, buzzing and ineffectual. Kilowog was quiet for a moment. You dissolved the barrier, he said. The barrier was using a lot of concentration, Harry said. And you weren't going to stop testing it until it failed anyway. So I stopped defending and started solving. Kilowog looked at him with something that on a smaller, less granitic face might have been called surprise. Who taught you that? Nobody, Harry said. At my uncle's house, when Dudley was going to hit me, sometimes it was better to move than to try to block it. He paused. Is that bad? That, Kilowog said, is the single most tactically intelligent response I have seen from a first-week recruit in 300 years. He crossed his arms. Don't let it go to your head. Your constructs still destabilize under heat and you flinch when something comes at your face. I'll work on it, Harry said. You will, Kilowog agreed. From the top. Again. 5 years passed the way long things do when they are full, not quickly, but not slowly either. More like a river than like waiting. Harry grew. He trained. He made friends among the lanterns in the way that people with very strong, very particular characters always do, slowly, absolutely, and with the quality of permanence. Tamar too, whose father had known Hal Jordan and who Harry found sitting alone on the edge of a training platform one afternoon looking at a star that wasn't there anymore, became the closest thing he'd had to a brother. Iolandi, who was a princess of the Betrasis before she was a lantern and found all expressions of weakness, including her own, deeply irritating, sparred with Harry for 4 years, and they never determined who was actually better because neither of them was willing to lose. CHP was approximately the size of Dudley's smallest toy car and had the loudest laugh of any lantern on OA, and taught Harry things about spatial construct geometry that Kilowog reluctantly admitted were above his own curriculum. Hal came and went. He had a sector to cover, 600 or so inhabited planets that required a version of his attention that didn't always leave much left over. But he showed up. He showed up with a reliability that Harry respected more than he ever said out loud, because he'd learned early that the things worth keeping were the ones that came back. He taught Harry to fly, on an afternoon when the training grounds were empty and the sky above OA was doing something extraordinary with the light, 3 of the planet's nearest stars visible simultaneously, the sky a layered purple gold that made everything look like a painting. "Stop thinking about falling," Hal said, from somewhere approximately 40 feet above Harry's head. "I'm not thinking about falling," Harry said, from 6 feet off the ground where he'd been hovering for 20 minutes without being able to go higher. "You are. I can tell because you're looking down." "I'm looking down because looking down tells me how high I am." "Why does it matter how high you are?" "Because," Harry started. "You're a Green Lantern," Hal said. "You're in the middle of space on a daily basis. You've done zero-gravity training. You've sparred in the ionosphere. Why does 6 feet feel different from 600? Harry thought about it. Actually thought about it, which was a thing he'd learned to do because the ring rewarded genuine thinking and punished the substitute. He thought about what was different about 6 feet. What the ground meant that the ionosphere didn't. "I can still see where I started," he said. Hal was quiet for a moment. "Yeah," he said. "That's it. So what do I do about it?" "Stop looking at where you started," Hal said. "Look at where you're going." Harry looked up. The 3 stars. The purple gold sky. The towers of OA dropping away below him as he rose, without quite deciding to rise, simply because the decision had already been made and the body had finally caught up with it. He went up to 200 feet in about 3 seconds. Then 500. The wind hit him and he laughed, actually laughed, out loud, surprised by it, and the ring lit up brighter than it had ever lit up in response to fear or determination or battle focus. It had a different quality in response to joy. Warmer. More expansive. Hal pulled up alongside him. "There you go," he said, not making a big deal of it, which Harry appreciated. "I've been doing this for 5 years, Harry said. "Why did it take me this long to do that?" "Because," Hal said, "you're really good at holding things together, and not great at letting go." He glanced sideways. "Working on it helps." Harry flew. Below him, OA turned. Above him, the 3 stars burned. He was 11 years old, and he had the ring and the sky and 5 years of a life that had been, improbably, given to him, and in 2 weeks, he was going back to England. He was going back to England because there was a school. And the school had sent him a letter. Hal was the one who told him about the letter. He sat Harry down in one of the smaller common rooms, a place that had comfortable chairs and a window that looked out over the training grounds, and which the lanterns used for the kinds of conversations that needed somewhere quieter than the main halls. "You know you're a wizard," Hal said. "I've known since I was 8, Harry said. "The ring flagged it. There's a different energy signature in my biology. It called it ambient magical resonance. You never mentioned it. You never asked." Harry looked at him steadily. "And I didn't know what it meant." "Does it matter?" "It matters," Hal said, "because there's a school. In Scotland. A magical school, and you've apparently been enrolled since birth, and they've now figured out where you are and sent an acceptance letter, and there are," he paused, choosing words, "people involved in this who have a lot of opinions about your future that they formed before you were old enough to have opinions of your own." "Dumbledore," Harry said. The ring had flagged that name too, over the years, in old signals to the sector, in quiet communications that someone had clearly assumed were private but which a ring with access to the local electromagnetic spectrum had not found difficult to intercept. Hal nodded. He's been looking for you. He thought you were with your aunt and uncle. Your file is not entirely straightforward. There are magical protections around your history that are legitimately impressive. But yeah. He knows where you are now. What does he want? He wants you to go to school, Hal said. He wants you to learn magic. He wants you to grow up in the wizarding world and become the person he believes you're supposed to be. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. The ring is yours, Harry. Nobody's taking it. But you have another part of yourself you haven't developed yet, and ignoring it isn't the same as choosing not to use it. You're going to have to decide what to do with it. Harry looked at his ring. Green light pulsed slowly from it. He'd trained himself out of the unconscious construct generation in year 2, but the light still responded to his emotional state. Right now it was steady. He was thinking clearly, which the ring approved of. I'll go, he said. I want to understand the magic. I want to know what I am, all of it. It won't be like OA, Hal said. They have a framework. Rules. A hierarchy. Some of those things are going to push back against you just by existing. The Guardians have a framework too, Harry said. And rules. And a hierarchy. He met Hal's eyes. I respect the things worth respecting. I don't respect things just because they're old or loud. He paused. You taught me that, actually. Hal made a sound that was caught between a laugh and a groan. I did, yeah. I'm a little worried about that now. You should be, Harry said, pleasantly. How long until the term starts? 3 weeks. Harry stood up. He was 11 years old and he was 110 pounds and he could generate constructs in 5 languages simultaneously and fly at 2/3 the speed of light in atmosphere. He had the ring on his right hand. He needed, the letter said, a wand. He thought that was interesting. Hal, he said, in the doorway. Does the Lantern Corps have any record of interacting with the wizarding world before? Not officially, Hal said. Unofficially, there's an old report from the 1700s about a sector scan that detected a concentration of unusual energy readings in Western Europe that nobody followed up on because it didn't seem to be threatening anything. He paused. The report used the phrase, ambient magical resonance. Same flag the ring used on you. Harry nodded. He'd expected something like that. So I'm not the first crossing point. You're the first one the ring chose, Hal said. Which means you're probably the most significant one. No pressure, Harry said. Enormous pressure, Hal agreed. Try to get some sleep. Diagon Alley hit Harry's senses like a sentence in a language he almost spoke. The magic was everywhere, folded into the architecture, layered in the cobblestones, threading through the people moving through the narrow street in robes that ranged from sensible wool to what appeared to be peacock-patterned silk. His ring hummed quietly, not alarmed, not energized, more like the low register of recognition. Like 2 instruments in the same key. He'd come alone, technically. Hal had arranged a Gringotts key and an address and some currency that his parents had apparently left in a vault that had been sitting untouched for 10 years, and had told him the leaky cauldron was the entry point. He'd found it without difficulty. The ring had mapped Diagon Alley from magical resonance readings before he'd even tapped the brick sequence, which felt like cheating and also like Tuesday. He needed a wand. Ollivander's was smaller than he expected. The shop had the quality of places that are very certain of their own importance without needing to advertise it, quiet, precise, slightly dusty in a way that was deliberate rather than neglected. Every box on every shelf was exactly aligned. The measuring tape that launched itself at Harry the moment he stepped inside had clearly been doing this for a very long time and had no interest in stopping. Mr. Ollivander emerged from between the shelves. He was old in the particular way that people are old when their specialty is very old, not frail, but worn smooth, like a stone in a river. He looked at Harry with eyes that had measured a great many things and found a great many of them interesting. Then his gaze fell on the ring. He stopped moving. It was a very specific stillness, not alarmed, Harry noted, not threatened. Something closer to fascinated, with a careful edge. "Harry Potter," Ollivander said. "Mr. Ollivander," Harry said. "I was told you'd been found," the old man said. He was still looking at the ring. "I was not told about that." "The ring," Harry said. "The ring," Ollivander agreed. He tilted his head. "May I?" Harry extended his hand. Ollivander leaned close, examining the ring with the attention of a craftsman assessing something from a tradition he wasn't trained in. The ring, which had opinions about most things, glowed steadily under scrutiny. Not defensively. Curiously. "Interesting," Ollivander said. "The wand chooses the wizard, Mr. Potter. I have believed this for 60 years and I have not yet been wrong." He straightened. "But you already have a instrument. One of considerable power." He looked at Harry. "What happens when we add another?" "I don't know," Harry said. "That's why I'm here." Something shifted in Ollivander's expression. It was the specific pleasure of a craftsman who has been given an unusual problem. "Let's find out," he said, and disappeared into the shelves. He came back with 3 boxes. Then 5. Then, after Harry had tried 17 wands and each one had either done nothing, produced a thin spray of unhelpful sparks, or in one case launched 3 boxes off a high shelf without apparent cause, he stood in the middle of the shop with a particular look on his face. "Curious," he said, more to himself than to Harry. "Every wand is responding to the ring. The ring's field is, it's interfering with the wand's own resonance signature. They're competing for dominance." He went back into the shelves and stayed there for what felt like a long time. When he returned, he was carrying a single box, and something about the way he carried it was different. More careful. More deliberate. "Holly and phoenix feather," Ollivander said, 11 inches. Reasonably supple. The phoenix that gave the tail feather also gave one other, just one other, and it is in a wand that you would know the name of, Mr. Potter. Harry knew. The ring had briefed him extensively on the wizarding world before he'd arrived, not because he'd asked it to do so explicitly, but because he'd been thinking about it and the ring had a habit of noticing what he was thinking about. He knew about Voldemort. He knew about the night in Godric's Hollow. He knew about the scar on his forehead and what it might mean. He took the wand. The effect was immediate and unlike every other wand he'd tried. There was no explosion, no shower of sparks, no dramatic visual display. What happened was subtler and stranger. The ring flared green at the precise moment the wand warmed in his hand, and for 1 second, not a long second, barely a breath, the 2 instruments synchronized. Green and gold. 2 sources of light in the same frequency. Then it passed. The wand was warm in his hand and felt right, in the way that fit things feel right, not special, not magical, just correct. "Remarkable," Ollivander said softly. He was watching Harry with an expression that contained several layers of things Harry would need more time to read. "Most remarkable. I wonder," he stopped himself. Started again. "Be careful, Mr. Potter. 2 instruments of great power in the hands of one wielder. The resonance between them is, I don't know what that becomes, under pressure." He paused. "No one does, because it hasn't happened before." "I'll be careful," Harry said. He left Ollivander's with the wand in his bag and the ring on his finger, and the ring was still doing that thing, that very faint harmonic, like 2 tuning forks struck at a slight interval, their sound waves building on each other. He paused outside on the cobblestones of Diagon Alley and held his hand up and looked at the ring, and thought, 2 instruments. 2 sources. 2 systems of law that have never met before. He thought about what Kilowog had said, the morning Harry had left OA. They'd been standing on the landing platform, the same one Harry had arrived on 5 years ago, and the sky had been doing something complicated with clouds. Kilowog had handed him a small communication device, standard issue, non-conspicuous, built into the ring's secondary functions so it looked like nothing from the outside. He'd looked at Harry for a long time. "You remember what I told you your first week," he'd said. "Everything you make is an extension of your intention," Harry said. "Not your thought," Kilowog said. "Your intention." He tapped the ring once, lightly. "You go to this school, you're going to run into people who want to tell you what your intention is supposed to be. You're going to meet people who've decided what you mean. What you're for." He met Harry's eyes. "Don't let them." Harry had nodded. "I mean it, Puzzer," Kilowog had said. "Don't let them." Standing in Diagon Alley with his Hollyann Phoenix feather wand in his bag and the ring on his finger, Harry thought about Kilowog's face when he'd said that. He thought about the padlock on the outside of the cupboard door. He thought about Dumbledore, who had plans, and Ollivander, who had wonder, and Hal Jordan, who came back. He thought, "I know what I am. I'm a Green Lantern. I am also, apparently, a wizard. I am the son of James and Lily Potter, who loved each other enough that the aftershock of it stopped a Dark Lord. I am the person who measured a 32-inch cupboard with string at age 6 because measuring things was something to do, and I refused to be measured by anyone else." He put his hand down. The ring glowed. He went to buy his school supplies. 3 weeks later, on a perfectly ordinary September 1st, a boy with messy black hair, bright green eyes, a lightning bolt scar, and a quietly glowing ring on his right hand wheeled a trolley through the barrier between platforms 9 and 10 at King's Cross Station and stepped onto platform 9 3/4 for the first time. He stood there for a moment in the steam and the noise and the crowding families, and he took it in, the scarlet engine, the uniformed students, the owls in their cages, the parents pressing sandwiches into hands and straightening collars with that particular worried love that parents have when they are about to let go of something. He watched a red-headed woman with 7 children moving through the crowd like a warm ship, and thought about what that must be like, to have a family so large you navigated public spaces the way you navigated weather. He found an empty compartment. He stored his trunk. He sat down, and the ring pulsed once, steadily, and the wand in his bag was warm through the material. 2 systems. 2 sources. 1 intention. The train began to move. Chapter 2, Platform 9 3/4. The compartment door slid open about 20 minutes outside London, and Ron Weasley fell through it in the specific way that people fall through doors when they've been trying to look casual about looking for somewhere to sit and have miscalculated the casualness. He caught himself on the door frame. He looked at Harry. He looked at the ring, which was doing its low background glow. It never really stopped. Harry had stopped noticing it the way you stop noticing your own heartbeat. Ron looked at the ring for slightly longer than he looked at Harry, which was understandable. "Everywhere else is full," Ron said. "Can I?" "Go ahead," Harry said. Ron sat down across from him, pushed his robe straight, and then immediately abandoned any pretense of nonchalance by leaning forward and looking at the ring with open, uncomplicated curiosity. This was the thing Harry liked about him within the first 30 seconds, though he wouldn't have been able to articulate it yet. Ron Weasley looked at interesting things with interest, without performing indifference. "What is that?" Ron asked. "Green Lantern ring," Harry said. Ron sat back. "No. Yes. You're actually," Ron's eyes went wide. "My dad has a whole box of Muggle comics. Green Lanterns in half of them. He says they're culturally significant." He stared at the ring. "You're actually a Green Lantern." "For 5 years," Harry said. "You're 11. I was recruited at 6. Ron processed this with the visible effort of someone reorganizing a significant amount of mental furniture. Then he stuck out his hand. "Ron Weasley. Harry Potter." The handshake happened. Then Ron's face did something complicated, the recognition landing, the recalibration, the brief flicker of the thing that Harry had already learned to watch for and was already tired of, the moment when a person stopped seeing him and started seeing the name. But Ron recovered fast. Faster than Harry expected. "Right," he said, so yeah, of course, the scar and everything, I should have, but the ring is genuinely a more interesting thing, isn't it? Like, the scar is, no offense, kind of a baby thing that happened to you. The ring is a thing you did. Harry looked at him. He felt something settle, the way things settle when they land in the right place. Exactly, he said. Can you make stuff with it? Harry made a small construct of the Hogwarts Express, accurate to the locomotive visible through the window as the train had cleared the station, rendered in clean green light, and held it above his palm. Ron made a noise that was purely involuntary. That is, Ron said, genuinely the best thing I've ever seen, and I grew up in a house full of magic. It runs on willpower, Harry said, letting the construct dissolve. The ring translates intention into construct. You have to be very clear about what you want. I am famously unclear about what I want, Ron said cheerfully. My mum says so regularly. He leaned back. So you've been in space? OA mostly. Some sector training. What's space like? Harry thought about it properly, the way the question deserved. Big, he said. Not in a frightening way. Big in a way that makes most of the things people worry about seem like they have the wrong scale. Ron nodded slowly. I've got 6 siblings, he said, and we don't have a lot of money, and sometimes that feels enormous. Like it fills everything. He looked out the window at the countryside rolling past. I like the idea of it having the wrong scale. It does, Harry said simply. I promise. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of silence that happens between people who are essentially the same kind of quiet, not shy, not withdrawn, just economical. Then Ron produced a stack of sandwiches from his bag, enormous, thick-cut, clearly made by someone who understood that food was an expression of love, and offered half without making it a transaction, and Harry ate his first home-cooked sandwich and thought it was the best thing he'd tasted in recent memory. The compartment door opened again. The girl who stepped in had bushy brown hair and an expression of focused purposefulness that suggested she had been doing something systematic and this was the latest step in it. She looked at Ron. She looked at Harry. She looked at the ring. Unlike Ron, she didn't react to the ring first. She looked at Harry's face first, then the scar, then the ring, processing all 3 in sequence with the efficiency of someone who had done some advanced reading and was now cross-referencing. I'm Hermione Granger, she said. I've read about Green Lanterns. The ring works on willpower and constructs hardlight objects, yes. And you're Harry Potter, which means there are 2 significant sources of magical or quasi-magical power currently in this compartment. I've been looking for you since Birmingham. She paused. Can I sit down? Yes, Harry said. She sat next to Ron, who had the expression of someone who had just been organized at speed and wasn't sure how he felt about it. I'm Ron, he offered. I know, Hermione said. Weasley family. You're the 6th of 7. She looked at Harry. I've been thinking about your ring and your magic and whether they interact. Has anyone studied that? Not formally, Harry said. Ollivander noticed the resonance when I bought my wand. Said he'd never seen anything like it. Ollivander notices things, Hermione said seriously. He told me my wand was vine wood and dragon heartstring and that it was waiting for someone with a great deal to prove. She seemed to feel the slight vulnerability in sharing that and moved briskly past it. What kind of interactions have you observed between the ring and ambient magic? The ring translates all energy signatures it encounters, Harry said. It flagged the magic as ambient magical resonance when I was 8. In Diagon Alley, it was continuously mapping the magical architecture. Everything radiates, the buildings, the people, the objects. The ring reads it like light spectrum data. He paused. When I held my wand for the first time, they synchronized. Just for a second. Hermione leaned forward. Synchronized how? Frequency, Harry said. Same energy signature. Different source, same output. Hermione sat back and was quiet for approximately 4 seconds, which appeared to be her version of an extended silence. "That's fascinating," she said. "That might cause problems." "Or interesting things," Ron said. "Those are often the same thing," Hermione said. Ron looked at Harry. "I like her," he said, with the air of a verdict delivered. The Hogwarts Express arrived at Hogsmeade Station at dusk, and the castle appeared across the lake in the way that things built for impact tend to appear, suddenly, completely, as if it had been waiting in that specific arrangement of turrets and lit windows for exactly this moment. Harry looked at it from the bow of one of the boats and felt the ring's energy shift under his skin. Not a warning. Something more like the register it used when he flew over OA at altitude and the full shape of the planet became visible. Recognition, maybe. Of something old. The castle was saturated with magic. Not the way Diagon Alley had been saturated, layered and commercial and active. This was deeper, geological. Centuries of intent compressed into stone, the way heat gets compressed into coal. The ring was mapping it continuously, building a picture of the magical architecture that Harry suspected was more detailed than anything in any Hogwarts record. Ron was looking at the castle with an expression that contained the particular combination of familiarity and renewed wonder that characterized people seeing significant things for the second or third time. "Every year," he said, almost to himself. "You think it'll be less impressive and it just isn't." "Have you been before?" Harry asked. "My brothers went here. I've heard about it my whole life." He looked sideways at Harry. "But hearing about something and actually seeing it is different, isn't it?" "Yes," Harry said, thinking about the difference between reading about OA and landing on OA for the first time. Hermione, in the boat ahead of them, was looking at the castle with the expression of someone who was going to read every book in the library and was already making preliminary organizational decisions. They went through the doors and up into the entrance hall, which was warm and loud and smelled of stone and old wood and something like lightning, and then through to the great hall, which made the entrance hall feel modest. Harry stood in the doorway and looked at the enchanted ceiling, the twilight sky exactly reproduced overhead, early stars visible through what his ring immediately confirmed was not actually open air but a remarkably sophisticated magical construct simulating atmospheric depth, and felt something he hadn't expected. He felt, for the first time in his memory, like he was in a place that had been built to make people feel like they belonged. He hadn't belonged at Privet Drive. He belonged on OA, in the way that you belong to something you chose. But this was different. This was a place that had been built for students, plural, for centuries of students, with the specific intention of taking young people and giving them something. Not asking anything first. Just giving. He sat at the table a prefect directed him toward and watched the first years file in for the sorting, and watched the teachers at the high table, and found Dumbledore without trying. Albus Dumbledore was watching him. Not in the way that people watched Harry Potter generally, with the slightly overwhelmed reverence of someone in the presence of a significant historical event. Dumbledore watched him the way Kilowog watched new constructs under stress, assessing load-bearing capacity. Looking for lines of failure. Harry looked back, steadily, without looking away, and after a moment Dumbledore's expression shifted. He smiled, a warm, genuine smile, nothing false in it, and inclined his head slightly. Harry inclined his head in return. Across the table, Ron, who had been watching this exchange, leaned over. "Did you just have a stare-off with the headmaster?" he murmured. "I was being polite," Harry said. "You looked like you were doing border negotiations," Ron said. He wasn't entirely wrong. The sorting had the quality of ritual, the hat, the stool, the names called, the table eruptions, the particular theater of it. Harry watched the hat. His ring had flagged it early. The hat was saturated with ancient magic, a complex layering of enchantment and genuine sentient will that was unlike any other object in the room. It was, the ring's analysis suggested, broadly analogous to a construct, a powerful mind's will externalized into material form, which Harry found interesting on several levels. When his name was called, the hall went quiet. He walked up to the stool and sat down, and the hat was placed on his head, and in the small dark that followed he heard it. "Well," said the sorting hat, inside his head, and its mental voice was old the way rivers are old, worn smooth but with significant depth underneath. "Well, well, well. I haven't had one like you since," it seemed to search. "No. Never. Not one like you. Where do I belong?" Harry asked it. He wasn't nervous. He was curious. "That's the question, isn't it?" the hat said. "You have the courage for Gryffindor, not bravado, actual courage, the kind that knows what it costs. You have the mind for Ravenclaw, though you learn through doing rather than reading, and you'd find some of them exhausting. You have the ambition for Slytherin, though yours is clean, you want to be excellent, not powerful, which is a distinction most people miss." A pause. "And Hufflepuff would be wrong for you, which is interesting because your loyalty is among the strongest I've encountered." "You're not telling me where I belong," Harry observed. "I'm telling you what you are," the hat said. "You already know where you belong. You made that choice at 6 years old in a cupboard when you didn't let the dark make you afraid of it. You've been making it every day since." Another pause. "Gryffindor." The table roared. Harry took the hat off, handed it back, and walked to the Gryffindor table and sat next to a boy who introduced himself as Neville Longbottom in the voice of someone who expected the information to be received with indifference and was prepared for that. Harry shook his hand and said "Harry" and left off the last name, and Neville's round face did the flicker, the recognition, and recovered. Ron appeared and dropped into the seat across from him, and then Hermione was sorted. The hat put her in Gryffindor with an alacrity that suggested it had barely needed to look, and the feast materialized on the table in a way that the ring logged as a Class 3 magical materialization event and Harry experienced as an enormous amount of excellent food. He ate. He talked. He listened. The ring hummed its background hum. He thought, going to like it here. The great hall cleared slowly after the feast, students moving in clumps toward staircases that, according to Ron, changed direction with some regularity and couldn't be fully trusted. Harry was one of the last to leave his seat, not from slowness but because he was watching the teachers file out from the high table, and he wanted to see all of them. Quirrell, he'd already clocked. He'd clocked him before the feast started, because the ring had registered something unusual about the professor's magical signature. Not one source, which was normal. 2. Layered, one beneath the other, the deeper one partially occluded by what appeared to be a strong suppression charm. The ring hadn't flagged it as immediately threatening, the deeper signature was weak, dormant almost, but it had logged it, the way it logged everything unusual, without alarm, with attention. He filed it. He would think about it more carefully later. Snape was interesting for different reasons. The potions master had looked at Harry during the feast with an expression that had layers in it, contempt, certainly, the automatic contempt of someone who had already categorized you before meeting you, but underneath that something older and more complicated, a grief-shaped thing. His ring could read emotional state to a limited degree, not specifically, but in broad spectrum, and Snape's broad spectrum was extraordinary, a man carrying a significant quantity of old pain, who had organized his entire life around the management of that pain, and who found Harry Potter's existence specifically problematic. Harry thought, he knew my mother. The ring had that in its files, the history of the Marauders, Snape's school years, the complicated knot of it. He didn't judge the grief. But he filed the contempt separately, because contempt aimed at him specifically was a separate thing from grief, and he would deal with each appropriately. He was still thinking about this when someone sat down beside him. He looked up. Percy Weasley, Ron's prefect brother, identified by Ron's running commentary during the feast, red hair and a prefect badge worn with the seriousness of a military decoration, was looking at the ring. "Is that," Percy started. "Yes," Harry said. "A Green Lantern ring." "Yes." Percy seemed to struggle with something. His instinct, Harry suspected, was to tell him it was against regulations. His actual knowledge base didn't contain a regulation covering it, which was causing evident frustration. There are no specific rules, he said, carefully, about non-magical objects at Hogwarts. Great, Harry said pleasantly. Then we're all set. He went upstairs to bed. Potions, on Thursday morning, was taught in the dungeons, and the dungeons had a quality that Harry's ring found particularly interesting. The lowest levels of the castle, farthest from the sky, were where the oldest magic was concentrated most densely. It sat in the walls like pressure. The ring mapped it quietly while Harry took notes on ingredient properties, because the ring was very good at multitasking. Snape's entrance was theatrical in the way that very controlled people are theatrical when they've decided that control itself is a performance. He moved through the dungeon classroom with the deliberate unhurriedness of someone who knew exactly how the room's silence was being generated and had decided to extend it for maximum effect. He took the register with a practiced drawl and came, inevitably, to Harry's name. "Ah," Snape said. "Mr. Potter. Our celebrity." The class waited for something to happen. What usually happened, Harry suspected, was that new students flinched. He looked up from his notes and met Snape's eyes without hurry and without defiance, without, most importantly, the anxious blankness of someone trying not to attract attention. He just looked back. Calm. Present. Curious, even. Snape's rhythm broke, almost imperceptibly. He was accustomed to a specific response from a specific kind of student in this specific situation, and Harry was not providing it. His eyes dropped briefly to the ring. His expression didn't change, but the emotional spectrum reading shifted, the contempt was still there, the grief was still there, and now there was a new element. Harry identified it after a moment: recalibration. "What," Snape said, the drawl back and fully deployed, "would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood?" Harry knew the answer. He'd read all his textbooks cover to cover on the train, in 3 hours, using the ring's ability to help organize and retain information at well above average processing speed. "Draught of living death," he said. "One of the most powerful sleeping potions known to exist." Brief silence. The class stirred slightly, surprised. "Where," Snape continued, smooth and cold, "would you look if I told you to find me a bezoar?" "Stomach of a goat," Harry said. "It's a calcified mass that counteracts most poisons. It's been used as an antidote since at least ancient Persia." Another silence. Slightly different texture. "What," Snape said, and now there was an edge in it, a slight pressure, "is the difference between monkshood and wolfsbane?" "They're the same plant," Harry said. "Also called aconite. Different regional names, same root, same properties. Extremely toxic, used in small quantities in several potions requiring soporific compounds." He looked up from his notes where he'd been writing throughout. "If you're going to test me, Professor, you should probably use something from the 7th-year curriculum. This is all first-year material." The dungeon went silent in a different way. The silence had texture now, the specific texture of 30 students collectively holding their breath. Snape looked at Harry for a long moment. His eyes were flat and difficult to read at surface level, but the ring's red was more complex. The contempt had gone up, yes, but the recalibration was more prominent now. A mind that was genuinely reassessing. 10 points from Gryffindor, Snape said, silkily, for presumption. "Of course," Harry said, without inflection. He went back to his notes. Ron, across the table, was pressing his lips together very firmly. His shoulders were shaking very slightly. Harry didn't look at him because if he looked at him he would laugh, and laughing would cost Gryffindor another 10 points, and he was fairly sure they needed those. Later, crossing the grounds between classes, Ron said, you can't do that to Snape." "I didn't do anything to Snape," Harry said. "I answered his questions." He looked like he swallowed something. "He took points off for it," Hermione said, from Harry's other side, where she'd been walking with a textbook open. "That was unfair. Your answers were all correct." "I know," Harry said. "You don't seem bothered," Ron said. He took 10 points. He'll take more at some point. Eventually the score between us will reflect the reality of the situation. He glanced at Ron. His problem with me is personal. The ring reads emotional state in broad spectrum and his has a very specific grief signature when he looks at me. He knew my mother. He did. Hermione looked up from her book. They were at school together, Harry said. It's complicated and old and not something I can fix for him. He paused. But I'm not going to pretend to be less capable than I am because it would make him more comfortable. That's not something I'm willing to do for anyone. Ron and Hermione were quiet for a beat. Fair enough, Ron said. More than fair, Hermione said, and closed her textbook. The ring's first significant interaction with Hogwarts magic happened in Transfiguration, which felt appropriate given that Transfiguration was the discipline most directly concerned with the relationship between will and material reality. Professor McGonagall had the quality of people who are precise in the way that surgery is precise, not cold, but economical. She transformed her desk into a pig and back without apparent effort and looked at the class over her glasses with the expression of a person who was going to be patient with your mediocrity for approximately the amount of time it took you to stop being mediocre, and not a moment longer. Today, she said, you will attempt to transfigure a match into a needle. You will be working from the Chapter 3 principles. I will be expecting results. Harry read the principles. He understood them conceptually, willpower shaping material through magical intent, the wand serving as a conduit between the wizard's mind and the physical world. He understood this, because it was structurally identical to what his ring did. Different source, same mechanism. He picked up the match. He picked up his wand. The wand warmed in his hand immediately, the way it always did. The ring pulsed once, low, in response. Harry felt the brief harmonic, the two frequencies finding each other, not merging, just acknowledging. He pointed the wand at the match, held the clear image of a needle in his mind with the kind of precision he used for complex constructs, and said, "Transfigura." The match became a needle. Not gradually, not partially. Completely, instantly, a silver needle lying on the desk with perfect surface finish and correct gauge. The kind of result that took most students 3 weeks of daily practice. McGonagall was at his desk inside of 10 seconds. She picked up the needle and turned it over in her fingers with the care of someone verifying craftsmanship. She looked at Harry. "How?" she said, crisply. "I used the same mental process I use for constructs," Harry said. Clear image of the target state, precise intent, wand as conduit. The principles in Chapter 3 describe exactly what the ring does through a different mechanism. McGonagall set the needle down. She looked at his ring for a moment, the way Ollivander had, not threatened, professionally interested. "The ring and the wand," she said. "You're using them in parallel." "Not exactly," Harry said. "More like, they're the same kind of thought, expressed through different materials." He paused. "The ring is reading the ambient magic in the room, Professor. It's been doing it since I arrived. Hogwarts has an extraordinary magical architecture." McGonagall looked at him for another moment. Then she turned to the class. "Mr. Potter has demonstrated the correct result," she said. "I expect the rest of you to attempt it, not observe it." She looked back at Harry briefly and said, quietly, 5 points to Gryffindor. "And I'd like to speak with you after class." The conversation after class lasted 12 minutes. McGonagall sat at her desk and asked Harry about the ring with the focused precision she applied to everything, what it could do, how it interacted with magic, whether he'd observed interference effects. She took notes. She did not express shock or perform amazement. She simply processed new information with the efficiency of a rigorous mind. At the end she said, "I'll be speaking to the headmaster about this. There are implications for your magical education that need to be considered." Then, after a brief pause, the professional manner softening by about 3 degrees, "Your mother was exceptionally gifted at transfiguration. She saw forms the same way you apparently do, complete, immediate. She looked at her desk. "It's good to see you, Mr. Potter." Harry gathered his bag. "Thank you, Professor," he said. "For seeing me, and not just the name." McGonagall looked up sharply. Something in her expression moved. "Yes," she said, after a moment. "Well. Off you go." The Ring's second significant interaction with Hogwarts magic happened 3 weeks into term, at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night, in a girl's bathroom on the second floor, involving a mountain troll. Harry had learned about the troll from the Ring before Quirrell's panicked announcement at the feast. The Ring had registered an anomalous signature moving through the lower corridors about 40 minutes before the teachers realized anything was wrong, and Harry had been sitting at the Gryffindor table quietly tracking its position while eating pudding. By the time Quirrell burst through the doors, Harry already knew the troll was large, moving slowly, and had recently changed direction toward the girls' bathrooms, possibly drawn by the sound of sobbing, because Hermione had gone there after Ron made a thoughtless remark about her being insufferable, and she had been crying, which Harry had also registered and had been planning to address as soon as the feast ended. So when Percy Weasley shouted at the first years to go back to the dormitory, Harry went the other direction. He found the bathroom by following the Ring's position tracking. Ron arrived approximately 15 seconds later, which meant he'd been following Harry rather than following the prefect, which Harry noted without comment. They stood in the corridor outside the bathroom door and listened to the troll's footsteps, heavy, wet, echoing through the stone, and the sound underneath it, a sound that was not quite crying anymore, more like controlled terror. "Hermione's in there," Ron said. "I know," Harry said. He was thinking. The Ring was already running tactical analysis, troll dimensions versus corridor width versus bathroom doorway, approximate mass, probable reaction time, structural load bearing of the ceiling above it. "What are we doing?" Ron asked. He wasn't afraid, Harry noticed, or rather, he was afraid in the exact right way, the way that sharpens rather than paralyzes. Ron Weasley processed fear into readiness, which was something Harry respected immediately and continued to respect. "I'm going in," Harry said. "Your wand, have you been practicing the Wingardium Leviosa from Charms?" "Yeah, but I haven't." "You've got it," Harry said, not as encouragement but as statement of fact, because the Ring had been observing wand work in classes for 3 weeks and Ron's casting was considerably stronger than he thought it was. He simply lacked evidence of that, and Harry had evidence. "When I go in, I'll occupy the troll. There's a wooden stall partition in there, I can see the floor gap. When I create an opening, levitate the troll's club. Just up. High enough that it can't swing it. You can see the floor gap, through the Ring." "Yes." Harry put his hand on the door. "You're going to be good at this, Ron." He went in before Ron could respond to that. The troll was 12 feet tall and approximately the density of a small house, and it had Hermione backed into the far corner between the sinks and the last stall, and it was raising its club in the manner of something that had identified the most efficient way to solve a problem it found irritating. The bathroom smelled of troll, which was a specific and powerful smell that Harry filed for future reference. Hermione saw Harry. Her face did several things in rapid succession. The troll noticed Harry too. It turned, slowly, the way large things turn, not quickly but with enormous commitment once underway. It looked at him with small, dull, unfriendly eyes. Harry made a construct. Not a wall, he'd learned from Kilowog that walls were reactive. He made something specific, a large, bright green hand that reached forward and grabbed the troll's club at the handle, and simply held it. The troll looked at the hand. It pulled. The construct held. Harry had made it with the specific intention of resisting a pulling force, not just existing, and the Ring rewarded precision of intent. The troll pulled harder. The construct held. The troll looked at its club, then at Harry, then at the large glowing hand attached to its club, with the expression of a creature encountering conceptual difficulty. "Ron!" Harry said. The door opened. "Wingardium Leviosa." Ron's voice, clear and directed, and the club, the construct released the club at the exact moment Ron's spell took it. The club flew upward, hit the ceiling, and the troll looked up at it with an expression of genuine surprise. The distraction lasted about 4 seconds. 4 seconds was enough. Harry made a different construct, a blunt, heavy impact shape, built not with anger or force but with the clean intention of putting a large creature down safely, the way a sedative works rather than a weapon, and brought it across the back of the troll's knee with the precision of someone who had studied troll anatomy in the Ring's database at approximately 2 in the morning 2 weeks ago because he'd thought it might be useful. The troll sat down heavily. It did not get up. The bathroom floor cracked under the impact. The club hit the troll on the head on the way down from the ceiling, which was not part of Harry's plan but was satisfying in a way he didn't mention. 3 seconds of silence. Hermione came out from the corner. She looked at the unconscious troll. She looked at Ron. She looked at Harry, and at the ring, and her expression went through the full processing sequence before arriving at something that was approximately admiration but more rigorous. "You knew troll anatomy," she said. "I read about it," Harry said. "At 2 in the morning," she said, and it wasn't a question. He looked at her. "How do you know that?" "Because that's when I read about things I might need," she said. Then, quietly, "Thank you. Both of you." Ron, who was still holding his wand and looking at the troll with the expression of someone who has just discovered they're considerably braver than their prior evidence suggested, said, "Did you plan all of that?" "The hand thing and the release and the, mostly," Harry said. The club hitting it on the head was Ron's contribution. "I'll take it," Ron said. The teachers arrived 11 seconds later. They were not, Harry noted, particularly quick. McGonagall looked at the scene with the expression of someone assembling an incident report in real time: unconscious troll, cracked floor, 3 first years, green light residue on the troll's knee and the ceiling, Ron Weasley holding his wand with the post-adrenaline grip. She opened her mouth. "The troll came in while Hermione was in here," Harry said, before anyone could ask leading questions. "We followed when we heard the troll change direction toward the bathroom. Ron used Wingardium Leviosa to displace the club. I used the ring to manage the troll until it could be grounded." He paused. Ron's levitation was excellent, actually. Precise under pressure. McGonagall looked at Ron. "Is this accurate?" "Yes," Ron said, straightening slightly at the precise. 5 points each to Gryffindor, McGonagall said. She looked at the troll for a long moment. She looked at the green light residue. "And 10 more for effective problem solving." Her mouth compressed. "Extremely foolish, nonetheless, and I trust this will not become a habit." "Absolutely not," Hermione said. Harry said nothing, which McGonagall correctly read as the answer most consistent with honesty. Quirrell, in the corner, was looking at Harry's ring with an expression that was not the professional interest of McGonagall, nor the open curiosity of Ron, nor the rigorous fascination of Hermione. It was something else. Something with hunger underneath it. Something that sat on top of the doubled energy signature the ring had been tracking since the feast on the first night. Harry noticed. He didn't say anything. He filed it. They walked back to the tower through corridors that were quiet now, the emergency resolved, the castle settling back into its habitual nighttime sounds. Hermione walked between Harry and Ron, and at some point her shoulder was touching Ron's arm and his was touching Harry's, and nobody pointed this out because it would have made it formal and it didn't need to be formal. It was just the natural geometry of 3 people who had become, in the space of a bathroom and an unconscious troll, genuinely something to each other. "Harry," Hermione said, as they climbed the stairs to Gryffindor Tower. "Yes." The ring was reading the castle's magic. "This whole time. It's been building a map." "Yes," Harry said. "Of everything?" "Everything it can reach." "Which is most of it." She was quiet for 3 steps. "So you probably know things about this castle that no one else knows." "Probably," Harry said. "Is any of it dangerous?" He thought about Quirrell's doubled signature. He thought about the third-floor corridor that Dumbledore had mentioned at the start of term feast, the one that was out of bounds for reasons that a first year was not supposed to inquire about. He thought about the way the ring's map of the castle's magical architecture had a specific concentration of something in that corridor, something old and enormously powerful, that the ring's database had cross-referenced to exactly one entry: Philosopher's Stone, Creator Nicholas Flamel, status, legendary artifact, power output, extraordinary. Some of it, he said. Ron and Hermione both looked at him. I'll explain in the morning, Harry said. In daylight. With breakfast. Why in daylight? Ron asked. Because some things should be heard in the light, Harry said simply. They climbed. The ring glowed. Above them, the castle breathed around its secrets, and below them, 3 floors down and behind a locked door, something waited with the patience of something very old that had been waiting long before any of them were born and fully intended to keep waiting. Harry was going to have thoughts about that. Chapter 3, The Space Between Laws. The common room was empty when Harry came down at 6 in the morning, which was the way he preferred it for the first hour. He'd been waking at 6 since OA, Kilowog ran the first training session at 6:30 and the preparation time was non-negotiable, and Hogwarts had not changed that. He sat in the chair closest to the fire with his ring hand resting on his knee and ran a quiet diagnostic on the castle's magical architecture the way another person might do stretches. The map was better every day. The ring built it incrementally, adding resolution each time Harry moved through a new section of the castle, and what he had now was detailed enough to be useful: the magical layering of the foundations, the way the wards nested inside each other like rings of a tree, the concentration of specific enchantments in specific locations. The third-floor corridor sat in the map like a weight. The thing behind the locked door radiated in the ring's readings the way a star radiates, not dangerously, just with the matter-of-fact intensity of something containing enormous energy that hadn't been asked to do anything with it yet. He was thinking about this when Hermione came down the stairs, already dressed, already carrying a book. She stopped when she saw him. "You've been up for a while," she said. 6, Harry said. "Habit." She sat in the chair across from him, opened her book, then closed it again almost immediately. "You said some of it was dangerous." "I said I'd explain at breakfast." "Ron won't be up for 2 hours," she said. "Explain now and then explain again at breakfast." Harry looked at her. She met his gaze with the expression of someone who was extremely comfortable making requests that sounded like statements. He respected the consistency of it. "The third-floor corridor," he said. "Dumbledore mentioned it at the feast, out of bounds, someone who goes in will die, etc. The ring has been mapping the magical architecture since I arrived. Whatever is behind that locked door is an artifact of extraordinary power." The ring cross-referenced the energy signature and found one match in its database. He paused. Philosopher's Stone. Hermione's hand was very still on her closed book. "Nicholas Flamel's stone," she said. "Yes. It's supposedly legendary. Nobody's confirmed it's real." "It's real," Harry said. "It's 3 floors above us." She was quiet for a moment, processing. "Why is it here?" "That I don't know. Protection, presumably. Hogwarts is extraordinarily well defended." He looked at the fire. "But there's something else. Professor Quirrell." "What about him?" "His magical signature is doubled," Harry said. "The ring reads energy sources in the environment. Every person has a baseline magical signature, unique, consistent. Quirrell has 2. One is his. The other is underneath it, weaker, suppressed by a very complex set of charms." He paused. "The deeper one matches the residual signature from Godric's Hollow that the ring found in its historical sector files. The night my parents died." Hermione set her book down entirely. "Voldemort," she said, using the name without the flinch that most of the wizarding world apparently felt, which Harry noted with approval. "Something of him," Harry said. "Not whole. Partial. But present." He looked at her. He's in the school. He's here for the stone. Hermione was quiet for longer this time. The fire popped. Outside, the grounds were still dark, the first grey light of early morning just beginning at the edges of the windows. Dumbledore knows the stone is here, she said finally. He arranged the protections. Does he know about Quirrell? I don't know, Harry said. I don't know how much Dumbledore reads people versus observing them at a distance. He considered. He's very good at distance. We should tell him. Harry thought about Dumbledore watching him across the Great Hall on the first night. The assessment quality of that look. The warm smile after, genuine, nothing false in it, but deployed after the assessment, which meant the warmth was real but it was also, in some sense, a choice about presentation. We should be careful about what we tell him and when, he said. Dumbledore has plans for the stone. He may have plans for Quirrell. He almost certainly has plans for me, and telling him what the ring has found changes the information he has without necessarily changing his plans. Hermione looked at him with a complicated expression. That's quite a cynical read of the headmaster. It's not cynical, Harry said. He's a genuinely good person. He's also a very powerful strategist who's been managing long-term problems for decades and has developed habits that treat people as variables. He looked at his ring. I respect him. I'm not going to be his variable. She was quiet again. Then, what do we do? We learn, Harry said. We map the protections. We understand what we're dealing with before we make any moves. He glanced at her. You've already started looking into Flammel. It wasn't a question and she didn't treat it as one. The name was in a book I found in the library's restricted section cross-reference index, she said. Not the restricted section itself, just the index. He's mentioned in connection with alchemy going back to the 14th century. I've been gathering. Good, Harry said. Keep gathering. Ron's better with the castle's geography than either of us, he knows the layout from his brothers. We use what we have. You have a satellite map of the entire magical architecture. And you have the historical and theoretical framework to interpret what the map means, Harry said. The ring gives me data. You give me context. Those are different and both necessary. She looked at him for a moment. You're very good at knowing what people are useful for, she said. It was an observation, not a criticism, but it had a slight edge. I'm good at knowing what people are good at, Harry corrected quietly. Those are different things too. The edge went away. She opened her book. I'll have a full list of everything the library has on Flammel by Friday, she said. I know, Harry said. He looked back at the fire. Outside, the light was growing. Flying lessons were on Thursday afternoons, and Harry had been looking forward to them with a specific kind of anticipation, not because he needed to learn to fly a broomstick, but because he was curious about what flying on a broomstick felt like compared to flying on willpower alone. The ring generated its own lift field, a construct that supported flight with the same mechanism it used for everything else, intention made physical. A broomstick was different. A broomstick was mechanical. A broomstick worked through enchantment rather than live will. He landed on the grass beside his broom and waited while Madame Hooch gave instructions. Next to him, Neville Longbottom was looking at his broom with the expression of someone who'd read the accident statistics and found them troubling. He'd been holding it at arm's length, like it might escalate. It won't bite you until you tell it to go up, Harry told him. Neville laughed, surprised out of him, genuine. That's not actually reassuring. Hold it like you mean it, Harry said. The enchantment responds to intent. If you hold it like you're not sure, it's not sure. He paused. Same principle as any magical instrument. Neville looked at him, then at the broom. He straightened his grip. Like this? Better, Harry said. When Madame Hooch said to kick off, Harry rose smoothly to 20 feet and hovered, because 20 feet was polite and not showing off, and he watched the rest of the class because it was interesting to watch people learn to do something. Most of them wobbled. Ron went up at a mild lean, corrected clumsily but correctly, grinned with the specific grin of physical confidence reasserting itself. Neville rose about 4 feet and stopped there, white-knuckled but upright. Draco Malfoy snatched Neville's remembrall from where it had fallen. Neville had panicked briefly at 10 feet and dropped it, and rose to 60 feet with the ease of someone who'd been on a broom since he could walk. He held it up with an expression of casual cruelty that had been practiced enough to look like boredom. Madam Hooch had gone inside with Neville, who'd landed hard when he flinched. Draco looked down at the assembled class with the specific expression of a person who has identified that there are no adults present and has a very clear understanding of what that means. "I'll leave it somewhere for Longbottom to find," he said pleasantly. "Maybe in a tree." Several Slytherins laughed. Harry rose without rushing. He went up at an easy angle, not fast, not dramatically, just rose until he was level with Malfoy, close enough to speak at a normal volume. Malfoy's expression flickered. He'd expected something to react to, fear or anger or competitive aggression. Harry's face gave him none of those things. "Give it back," Harry said, conversationally. Malfoy looked at the ring. He looked at Harry. He was 11 and he'd grown up in a very specific world with very specific hierarchies and he'd been taught to read power clearly, and what he was reading right now was not giving him the result he'd prepared for. "Or what?" he said, but the pleasant cruelty had dropped about half a register. "Or I take it," Harry said. "And then we have a version of this conversation that you enjoy considerably less." He held Malfoy's eyes. "I'm not threatening you. I'm just being clear about the sequence of events. A beat. 2 beats." Malfoy dropped the remembrall. Harry caught it without looking, ring-assisted spatial awareness, not a show, just practical, and descended. He handed the remembrall to Neville, who had come back out from the castle with a bruised wrist and Madam Hooch beside him. "Someone knocked it out of the air," Harry said. "Retrieved it." Madam Hooch looked at Harry. She looked at the altitude he'd been at 30 seconds ago. She looked at the ring. Her expression was the very specific expression of a person who is choosing, professionally, not to pursue a line of inquiry that would complicate their afternoon. 5 points to Gryffindor, she said. "Let's continue." Neville pocketed the remembrall. He looked at Harry with an expression that was both grateful and slightly bewildered. "You didn't even," he started. "He made a choice," Harry said. "Most people do, when it's actually a choice and not just a reflex." He looked at Neville's wrist. "Does that hurt?" "A bit," Neville said honestly. "You flew to 4 feet and held it," Harry said. "That's not nothing." Neville blinked. Then, very quietly, "It didn't feel like nothing." "Because it wasn't," Harry said, and went back to his broom. McGonagall found Harry after dinner on Friday. She appeared at the Gryffindor table with the posture of someone delivering official information and the very slight softening around the eyes that meant she found the information personally agreeable. She set a broomstick card on the table in front of him. "The Nimbus 2000, she said. "It will be in your possession by Saturday morning. You've been made Seeker." Ron, who had been mid-sentence about something chess-related, stopped talking entirely. Hermione looked up from her book. Harry looked at the card. "First years can't have brooms," he said. "Special permission," McGonagall said. "From the headmaster." Harry looked at her. "Did the headmaster suggest making me Seeker, or did you?" Something moved in McGonagall's eyes. She said nothing. "I'll take the position," Harry said. "Thank you, Professor." He looked at the card again. "The Nimbus 2000 is the fastest broom currently manufactured." "It is," McGonagall said. "Is there a faster one in the restricted equipment stores?" Another brief pause. "There's a prototype Nimbus 2001, she said, that the manufacturer sent for field evaluation. It hasn't been cleared for student use." "How fast is it?" "Faster," she said. I'd like to use that one, Harry said. McGonagall looked at him for a long moment. Then, very quietly, I'll see what I can do. She turned to leave, then paused. Mr. Potter. Quidditch is important to this school. The House Cup matters to the students in this house. Those are real things, and I am genuinely pleased you've agreed to play. She looked at him over her glasses. I simply want to make sure you're playing for reasons that are also real. I'll play to win, Harry said. And because Ron's face just went a color I haven't seen before. McGonagall looked at Ron, whose face had indeed achieved a new and remarkable shade of excitement. She made a sound that was nearly a laugh. Good night, Mr. Potter. She left. Ron grabbed Harry's arm. Seeker, he said. First-year Seeker. With a Nimbus 2000. Mate, do you have any idea how? Tell me about the history, Harry said, because Ron's face when he talked about Quidditch was the same face he had when he talked about chess, completely present, every barrier down, and Harry liked that face. The House Cup. How close was it last year? Ron launched into the history of Gryffindor Quidditch with the joyful expertise of someone who has loved something for his entire life and rarely been asked to explain why. Harry listened with genuine attention, and Hermione listened while pretending to read, and outside the common room windows the Scottish autumn dark pressed in, and somewhere 3 floors above them the stone waited in its chamber, and Quirrell's doubled signature moved through the corridors below. October became November and November began pressing toward cold. Harry played Quidditch with the precise, controlled aggression of someone who had trained in zero-gravity combat and found a snitch's erratic flight pattern considerably less unpredictable than a drone swarm. He caught the snitch in his first match in 4 minutes and 37 seconds, which was a school record, and did it from a dive that the Ring's post-match analysis confirmed had reached approximately 60% of his sustainable atmospheric flight speed on a broomstick. The broom was not the limiting factor. His willingness to trust the broom was. He won. Gryffindor won. The stands erupted in the specific way that Quidditch crowds erupted, total and physical, and Harry landed on the pitch and felt the sound of it, 300 people genuinely delighted, a noise that had warmth in it because it was coming from people who cared about this, who loved this game and this house and this ordinary extraordinary thing, and felt something open in his chest that he hadn't known was closed. Ron was waiting for him at the edge of the pitch, grinning so hard it looked structural. 4 minutes, he said. 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Fred said it must be wrong. George said the timing charm must have malfunctioned. I said no, it's just Harry. Your brothers know the game, Harry said. Fred and George Weasley were the team's beaters and they were extraordinary. The Ring had logged their spatial awareness and reaction timing in the first practice and flagged both as exceptional. They should be playing professionally. They want to, Ron said. Mum wants them to study. Both things can be true, Harry said. Hermione met them halfway back to the castle, from the direction of the library rather than the stands. She'd watched the match, Harry knew. She just processed post-victory by going immediately to whatever she'd been thinking about during it rather than joining the immediate celebration. I found Flammel, she said, without preamble. Harry looked at her. Where? Dumbledore's chocolate frog card, she said. I've had it since the train and I only just looked at the back properly. Nicholas Flamel is noted as Dumbledore's partner in alchemy research. Flamel is the known creator of the Philosopher's Stone and the Elixir of Life. He's 665 years old. She had the card in her hand. He's real. The stone is real. The stone is here. We knew the stone was here, Ron said. We suspected, Hermione said. Now we have confirmation of what it is and who owns it and why it might be worth stealing. She looked at Harry. Voldemort, or whatever's left of him inside Quirrell, wouldn't just want the stone. He'd need it. Without a body, without the elixir, he can't fully return. Harry was still in his Quidditch robes, broom in hand, grass still on his boots. The post-match warmth from the crowd was still in him. He stood in the cooling November air and ran through the implications with the systematic efficiency he'd developed over 5 years of ring-assisted tactical analysis. The stone. Quirrell. Voldemort in pieces. The protections Dumbledore had built, which were formidable but not, according to the ring's mapping, designed to stop a threat already inside the school. He hasn't made his move yet, Harry said. The suppression charms on Quirrell's secondary signature are still holding. He's either not ready or he's waiting for something. Waiting for what? Ron asked. I don't know yet, Harry said. But I want to understand the protections before he does whatever he's waiting for. He looked at Hermione. The corridor. Can we? I've already started on the theory for the protections, Hermione said. She had the slightly defensive tone of someone who was going to preempt the question of how long she'd been working on this. From what I can determine from the library, there are almost certainly multiple layers. Hagrid's involved, whatever he collected from Gringotts in July, that's connected. There's likely something from multiple professors. There is, Harry confirmed. The ring's magical map had layers in the third-floor corridor that corresponded to at least 6 distinct magical signatures he'd identified as belonging to faculty members. Fluffy is on the first layer. Fluffy, Ron said. That's what Hagrid calls it, Harry said. 3-headed dog. About the size of a small house. Ancient magical creature, extremely territorial, responds to music with profound involuntary sedation. He paused. Hagrid mentioned it to us accidentally in October. He had a flute. Ron stared at him. You've been building this map for months, he said. The ring builds it automatically, Harry said. I've just been paying attention to what it finds. They started walking back toward the castle. The cold was serious now, post-match sweat turning uncomfortable. Around them, other students were streaming in the same direction, the post-game noise warm and loud, and nobody was paying attention to 3 first-years having a quiet conversation at the edge of the group. We go in, Harry said. Not now. Not yet. But we go in and we understand what's there. And when Quirrell makes his move, we're ready before he finishes making it. Why not tell Dumbledore? Ron said. Not, I get what you said before, about plans. But he's Dumbledore. He stopped Voldemort once. He didn't, Harry said. My mother stopped Voldemort. Dumbledore managed the aftermath. He said it without bitterness, just clarity. And I'm not saying Dumbledore isn't capable. I'm saying that if we tell Dumbledore what we know, we become part of his response to it. I'd rather know enough to be a response of our own. Ron absorbed this. That's either very smart or very 11-year-old, he said. Both, Hermione said. The two aren't mutually exclusive. The Quidditch season gave Harry something he hadn't expected, evidence of what Hogwarts looked like when it was joyful. Not the general background warmth of the castle, which was structural, built into the stones, but the active joy of people who loved something together. He watched matches from the air and from the stands and he began to understand what it meant to belong to a house, to carry a color, to want something in common with 100 other people. He was aware this was exactly what Dumbledore had intended, putting him on the team. He was also aware that it was genuinely working, and that those two things didn't cancel each other out. You could be grateful for a gift and honest about the motive behind the giving simultaneously. He sat in the common room on a rainy December Tuesday and played chess with Ron for the 3rd time and lost for the 3rd time, which was interesting because he was fairly good at chess and Ron was extraordinary at it. Ron played chess the way Harry handled ring constructs, not carefully, but with a deep structural intuition that outpaced deliberate calculation. He saw 3 moves ahead without trying. He saw the shape of the board rather than the individual pieces. You're going to do this professionally, Harry told him, moving a bishop into a position that was technically correct and would be demolished in 4 moves. Ron moved his knight. Chess isn't a profession. Wizard chess might be, Harry said. I don't know the full landscape of it here. On OA there were strategy competitions that some species took very seriously. Ron looked up from the board. What was it like, he asked. OA. What was it actually like, living there? Harry looked at the chess board for a moment. He thought about how to answer honestly without making it sound like the place had been perfect. Good, he said. Hard and good. Kilowog, my trainer, he's enormous and pink and he has the emotional register of a very determined piece of granite. He trained me for 5 years and never once made me feel like I wasn't worth the time. He paused. That sounds like a small thing. It wasn't. Ron was quiet for a beat. My mum's like that, he said. She makes you feel worth her time. All 7 of us, and she doesn't make it feel divided. He moved another piece. Check. Harry looked at the board. He was indeed in check. Kilowog used to say that the ring doesn't give you anything you don't have. But the people around the ring, the core, they reflect things back to you about yourself that the ring just confirms. He moved his king. Your mum reflects things back to your family. She'd like you, Ron said, and it was casual, said while moving another piece, but it had weight. She will like you. You're coming for Christmas. It wasn't a question. Harry looked at him. I wasn't invited. I'm inviting you, Ron said. Mum will make it official in the morning when I write her. But you're coming. He moved another piece. Checkmate. Harry looked at the board. He'd walked straight into it. You let me think I had an option on the bishop. I always let you think that, Ron said happily. You keep taking it. December arrived with the specific decisiveness of Scottish winter, which did not gently transition but simply appeared one morning with frost on every window and the understanding that warmth was now a thing you made rather than found. The castle adjusted magnificently, fires in every grate, the great hall warm with bodies and food and the particular energy of end of term, students simultaneously relieved about going home and nostalgic about the place they were leaving. Harry was staying. He'd written back to the Weasleys. Mrs. Weasley's letter had arrived exactly when Ron said it would, warm and immediate and containing 3 sentences about Harry's welfare that made the ring register a faint emotional response that Harry identified, after a moment, as the feeling of being thought about by someone you hadn't asked to think about you. He would visit the Weasleys for the latter part of the break. For the first few days, he was at Hogwarts. The morning the castle emptied, Harry went to the 3rd-floor corridor. Not alone, Hermione had stayed too, citing library research that couldn't wait, which was real but also wasn't the whole reason. Ron had taken the train but had left Harry a hand-drawn map of what he knew about the castle's less official passages, annotated in Ron's handwriting with observations like, "This one leads to Hooch's office, don't ask how I know," and, "Fred says the suit of armor near the potions corridor is a trap but I've never been able to figure out how." Harry and Hermione stood in front of the 3rd-floor corridor door, which was locked with a straightforward enchantment that Harry opened with a basic unlocking charm and Hermione would have opened in 3 seconds anyway. The ring's map was precise at this range. Beyond the door, Fluffy's chamber, then descending passages with multiple enchantment signatures, then at the bottom, the stones radiating warmth. "We're not taking the stone," Harry said. "Obviously," Hermione said. "We're mapping. Understanding." "Right," Harry said. He opened the door. Fluffy was asleep. Not because of music, because a small enchanted harp was playing in the corner. Harry and Hermione stood in the doorway and looked at the 3 sleeping heads, each larger than a dining table, and the harp, and the trapdoor beneath one enormous paw. "Someone's been here recently," Hermione whispered. The ring had already flagged it, residual magical traces on the trapdoor, multiple sources, one of them matching Quirrell's secondary signature. "Not tonight. Recently. Within the week." Harry looked at it. He looked at the harp. He looked at the stone signature below them, deep and warm and steady. "He's testing the route," Harry said quietly. "Learning the path." "Which means he's close," Hermione said. "Which means we need to be closer," Harry said. He crouched near the trapdoor without touching it and let the ring map the enchantments below, Devil's Snare by magical signature, consistent with Sprout's known research. Something aerial, magical objects, likely broomstick requirement. A chess pattern, large scale, he thought of Ron and felt something firm up. A troll. Something with potions and logic. And at the bottom, direct above the stone, a mirror enchantment so complex and so old that the ring spent a full minute parsing it before returning a partial result. The Mirror of Erased. He knew it from the ring's database, one of the oldest magical artifacts in Western European tradition, enchanted to show the viewer their deepest desire. Harry stood up. "We know the path," he said. "We know what each layer requires. Can you get through all of them?" Hermione asked. "I can get through most of them," he said honestly. "Some are more suited to specific capabilities. The chess layer is Ron." He looked at her. "The logic layer is you." She said nothing, but her chin came up slightly. "We don't go further tonight," Harry said. "We close this door and we go back. But now we know." "And Dumbledore?" Harry was quiet for a moment, looking at the sleeping three-headed dog and the dusty harp and the trapdoor. He thought about what Dumbledore had built here, this layered, elegant protection, each layer designed to challenge a specific kind of competence. It was brilliant. It was also, unmistakably, a test. Not just a protection. A test, built for someone. "Dumbledore knows I'm at this school," Harry said. "He knows about the ring. He left the stone here, in a school full of children, protected by puzzles." He looked at Hermione. "What does that tell you?" She thought about it. "He expects the stone to be challenged," she said slowly. "He wants whoever challenges it to have to prove themselves worthy of each layer." "He's built a test," Harry said. "For whoever comes through." "For you," Hermione said. "Possibly," Harry said. "Or he's built a test and I'm the element he didn't fully plan for." He closed the corridor door. "Either way, when the time comes, we go through prepared. Not reacting. Prepared." They walked back through the quiet castle, past sleeping portraits and guttering torches and the settled silence of a building temporarily returned to itself. The ring hummed. Somewhere below, the stone waited. Harry thought, Quirrell is close. Whatever is in Quirrell is patient, and patient things move when they decide the moment is right, and when they move fast. He thought, I'll be faster. The Weasley house was called the Burrow, and it justified the name by appearing to have been built by someone with a genuine love of rooms and a sincere indifference to conventional structural theory. It leaned. It had towers where towers had no business being. It had a clock in the kitchen with 9 hands labeled with family members' names and locations, and Harry's name appeared on it within 20 minutes of his arrival without anyone doing anything to add it, which Molly Weasley observed with the expression of someone who considered this a statement of fact rather than a surprise. "The house knows who belongs," she said, and handed him a mug of something hot. Harry held the mug and looked at the clock and felt the ring pulse with a warmth that was not tactical or analytical. He thought, I am in a house that put my name on its clock without being asked to. I am drinking something hot that someone made for me specifically. I am standing in a kitchen that smells like bread and something spiced and old wood, and there are Quidditch posters on every wall and someone somewhere upstairs is playing the Weird Sisters too loud, and this is a real place where real people actually live. "Thank you for having me," he said. Molly Weasley looked at him. Her gaze was sharp in the way that large-hearted people's gazes are sharp. She saw things. She saw him. "Of course," she said simply. "Now sit down before that tea goes cold." He sat. Ron appeared from somewhere with Fred and George immediately behind him, and the noise level of the house increased by 50%, and Harry sat at the kitchen table and drank his tea and thought, this is what the 32-inch cupboard was protecting me from. Not danger. This. The world had been keeping this from me, and I never knew what I was missing because I'd never seen it. The ring glowed very steadily on his hand. He let it. He was back at Hogwarts when term resumed, and 3 days into January, the ring flagged a change in Quirrell's secondary signature. Stronger. Less suppressed. The charms containing it had begun to degrade, and the signal beneath was more present, more awake, with the quality of something that had been dormant deciding it was done being dormant. Harry told Ron and Hermione that evening, in a quiet corner of the library where Hermione had been researching since breakfast. "It's soon," he said. "How soon?" Ron asked. "I don't know," Harry said. "Soon enough that we need to be ready, not just informed." He looked at both of them. "When it happens, it'll be fast. Quirrell has the school's blind spots memorized by now. He'll move at night, through the 3rd floor, probably when Dumbledore is absent." "Then we tell Dumbledore to not be absent," Ron said. "We tell him," Harry said. "We send him a message that Quirrell's planning to move. That gives him the information. What he does with it is his choice." He paused. "But I'm not waiting on his choice." "So we're going in," Hermione said. "When the time comes," Harry said. "Yes." Ron looked at the ring, then at Harry. "You're not scared," he said. It wasn't an accusation. "No," Harry said. "Why not?" Harry thought about it. "Because fear is a response to something you don't know how to face," he said. "I know how to face this. I'm not naive about how difficult it will be. But I know what I'm carrying and I know what I can do and I know," he paused, "I know that Voldemort, or whatever remains of him, has spent years assuming that I'm the small thing that should have died in a house in Godric's Hollow. He's planning around that assumption." He met Ron's eyes. "He doesn't know about the ring. He doesn't know what 5 years on OA does to a person. He's prepared for a boy who lived. The ring pulsed once, bright and steady. He's going to meet something considerably different." Ron was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I want to be very clear that I find this both terrifying and completely brilliant." "I know," Harry said. "Both things are appropriate." Hermione closed her book. "I've been reading about the Mirror of Eriste," she said. "If it shows you your deepest desire, and your deepest desire is complicated, if it has multiple layers, then it shows you something complicated," Harry said. "Which might not be immediately useful. Unless," Hermione said carefully, "your deepest desire is to have the stone and not use it. Which is presumably what the enchantment requires." Harry looked at her. "How do you know that?" "I don't," she said. "But it's the mirror of desire, and the stone is about life and transformation, and someone who wants to use it would be destroyed by seeing themselves with it." She paused. "Someone who wants to protect it might just get it." Harry thought about this for a long time. Outside the library window, January settled itself over the castle grounds, and the lake was grey-black under clouds, and the grounds were still, and the castle breathed around its secrets with the patience of stone, and somewhere in the body of an anxious, turban-wearing defense against the dark arts professor, something old and broken was deciding it was almost time. Harry let the ring map it. He let the data build. He let the plan form the way good plans form, not by forcing the shape but by understanding the ground and letting the shape come from that. He was ready. He just needed Quirrell to be ready too. Chapter 4, 2 sources. 1. Will Quirrell started making mistakes in February. Small ones. The kind that only registered if you were already watching closely, which Harry was. He knocked over a stack of books in the corridor outside the 3rd floor staircase and didn't stop to pick them up, which broke from his usual fastidious habit. He missed 2 meals in a single week. His turban, which he adjusted with the nervous frequency of someone concealing something they couldn't stop thinking about, had begun sitting slightly crooked, and the ring's magical map showed the suppression charms around his secondary signature degrading faster now, not catastrophically, but measurably, the way ice thins in late winter, uniform from above but compromised underneath. Harry tracked it without letting Quirrell know he was tracking it, which was easier than it should have been because Quirrell, when he looked at Harry at all, looked at the ring with an expression that was pure Voldemort, a cold, assessing hunger that had nothing to do with the anxious professor performance around it. Whatever was left of Voldemort in that skull under the turban had been thinking about the ring since September. Had been cataloging it. Trying to determine what it was and whether it was a threat. Harry let him wonder. Information asymmetry was a tactical asset. Kilowog had been very clear about that. The ring's interaction with the castle's magic had been developing in ways that were harder to track than Quirrell's deterioration, because they were subtler and more internal. Harry noticed it first in Charms class in late January, when Flitwick had them practicing Alohomora and Harry's wand produced a green-tinged light that Flitwick observed with the quiet intensity of a man who had been a dueling champion and knew how to notice things without appearing to notice them. The green came from the ring. Not a construct, not an active output, just a passive bleed, the ring's energy field bleeding into the wand's channel the way two rivers blend at a confluence, the water still flowing but carrying something of each other. Harry had tested it later in the empty common room, the wand alone produced normal spell output. The ring alone produced constructs. Together, at close contact, there was a resonance that changed the color and slightly amplified the output. Slightly, currently. He told Hermione, who immediately needed a piece of parchment. The wand is a conduit, she said, writing rapidly. It channels your magical energy through a specific medium, the wood, the core, and the combination determines the character of the output. The ring does something structurally similar but through a completely different mechanism. Will to construct rather than magic to spell. She paused. When they're in close proximity, they're cross-contaminating. Is that dangerous? Harry asked. I don't know, she said, with the honest precision she applied to things she didn't know. It might be neither dangerous nor safe. It might be something new. She looked at him. How does it feel? Harry considered. Natural, he said. Like they're finding a shared register. He paused. Like harmony. Hermione wrote that down too. Ron, reading over her shoulder, so your wand and your ring are becoming friends. More or less, Harry said. My wand and I are barely on speaking terms, Ron said. It's my brother Charlie's old wand. It doesn't like me and I don't like it. You use it well, Harry said. Under duress, Ron said. It's different. Most things are better under duress, Harry said. That's not necessarily an argument against the relationship. Ron pointed at him. That's either profound or worrying and I can't decide which. Snape found Harry in the library on a Thursday afternoon in mid-February, which was unusual enough that Harry put down his book and gave him full attention. Snape's emotional register was doing something complicated, the contempt was present but lower than usual, and the grief-shaped thing had moved closer to the surface, and there was something new in the mix that Harry identified after a moment as unease. Not fear. Snape was not a person who did fear in any conventional way. But unease, with a direction to it, pointed at Harry's ring. Mr. Potter, Snape said, standing on the other side of the table with his arms folded and his robes arranged in the specific way he wore them when he was working to project absolute composure. A word. Of course, Harry said. Snape looked around the library. They were alone in this section, Hermione was 3 aisles over, audible as a faint rustling of pages. Your ring, Snape said, and stopped. Harry waited. It reads magical signatures, Snape said. Not a question. It reads energy sources in the environment, Harry said carefully. Magical signatures are one category. And has it read anything in this castle that it found, anomalous? Harry looked at him. Snape was not asking idly. He knew something, or suspected something, and he had come to Harry rather than to Dumbledore with the question, which was interesting. The unease in his register made more sense now, he was concerned about something he wasn't sure he could bring to Dumbledore without evidence. What is it you think I might have found? Harry asked. Snape's jaw tightened. Answer the question, Potter. I will, Harry said, when I know whether you're asking on your own behalf or someone else's. He met Snape's eyes. Because you're here in a Thursday afternoon library instead of in your office, which means this isn't official. You came to me specifically. Which means you already know what you think I've found. The silence stretched. Snape looked at him with an expression that had shed most of its usual performed contempt, replaced by something rawer and harder to manage. He looked, for a moment, like what he actually was, a man carrying a great deal of complicated history, trying to protect something he couldn't name openly. Quirrell, Snape said, finally. Yes, Harry said. You've noticed. Since September. Snape sat down across from him, which was so out of character that Harry's ring actually registered it as a change in environmental conditions. He folded his hands on the table. What exactly have you observed? Doubled magical signature, Harry said. 2 sources, 1 body. The secondary source is suppressed but degrading. It matches a historical signature I have on record for events in Godric's Hollow in 1981. He paused. Voldemort, or a fragment of him, is sharing Quirrell's body. He's been here since September. He wants the stone. Snape was very still. You know about the stone. The ring mapped the artifact in the 3rd floor chamber in my first week, Harry said. Philosopher's Stone. Flamels. I confirmed the identification in December. And you haven't gone to Dumbledore, Snape said. I sent Dumbledore a message in January that Quirrell was planning to move and that he should consider his own absence from the castle carefully. Harry looked at him. I kept my own counsel because I intend to be part of the response when it happens. Telling Dumbledore in full would mean becoming part of Dumbledore's response, which is a different thing. Something moved in Snape's expression. He looked at Harry, really looked at him, without the filter of contempt or grief or the complex historical weight of a face he remembered belonging to someone else. He looked at what was actually there. You're 11, he said. Not a challenge. An observation. I know, Harry said. The ring doesn't change that. The ring changes a great deal, Snape said. It changes what I can do, Harry said. Not what I am. Another silence, different texture from the others they'd had. Less adversarial. I have been watching Quirrell, Snape said. For longer than September. I noticed the second signature in October. My training is different from a ring's analysis, but the principle is similar. Legilimency reads intention rather than energy, and Quirrell's intentions are layered in a way that is not natural to him. He paused. I went to Dumbledore in November. What did he say? He said the protections were sufficient, Snape said. He said Quirrell would not get through them without triggering alerts. His voice was neutral but the emotional register underneath it was not. He said the situation was under observation. He knows, Harry said. He knows something, Snape said. Whether he knows what you know is a different question. He looked at the ring. Your analysis is more precise than mine. The energy signature data, that's evidence of a kind I don't have. Do you want it? Harry asked. Snape looked at him. Yes. Harry took a piece of parchment and spent 8 minutes writing a precise summary of the ring's data on Quirrell's magical signature, the baseline, the secondary source, the degradation timeline, the historical cross-reference to Godric's Hollow. He was thorough and specific because Snape would respond to precision and dismiss vagueness. He slid it across the table. Snape read it. He read it twice. This is, he said, and stopped. Accurate, Harry said. Yes. Snape folded the parchment and put it inside his robe. He stood. He looked at Harry for a moment with an expression that was not quite anything Harry had a name for, not warm, not cold, something more like respect given reluctantly to someone you'd been planning to despise and found you couldn't manage. Potter, he said. When this comes to a head, and it will, within weeks at this deterioration rate, you will not go through that corridor alone. I know, Harry said. I am telling you that you will not, Snape said, with the emphasis of someone who is not making a suggestion. I heard you, Harry said. I'll have Ron and Hermione. Children, Snape said. Yes, Harry said simply. Children who are considerably more capable than the category implies. Ron will handle the chess layer. Hermione will handle the potion's logic. The ring and my wand will handle everything else. He paused. You should be available to move when the alert reaches Dumbledore. He'll need someone to get to the mirror chamber fast. Snape stared at him. You've mapped the entire sequence. I've had since September, Harry said. And Snape stopped himself. Looked at the parchment again. Looked at Harry. His expression completed a journey that had started in September in a dungeon classroom and arrived somewhere quite different. Don't do anything reckless, he said finally, which coming from Snape was approximately equivalent to anyone else saying take care. Reckless isn't my preference, Harry said. Efficient is. Snape left. Harry sat in the quiet library for a moment and felt the ring hum, warm and steady, and thought about the strange way allies formed sometimes, not from shared warmth but from shared purpose, people who couldn't stand each other and couldn't stand the alternative. The resonance between the ring and the wand changed in the second week of February. Harry was in the dormitory, sitting on his bed after lights out, practicing wand work in the dark the way he practiced ring constructs in the dark on OA, because doing things in the dark was a way of making sure you were doing them rather than performing them. He was running through the Charms curriculum, then the Transfiguration curriculum, then some third-year material he'd borrowed from the library. He was mid-spell, a moderately complex summoning charm that he'd been working on for its precision requirements, when the ring and wand hit a new frequency together. Not the casual blend of close proximity. Something more deliberate. More mutual. The summoning charm produced a construct. Not a physical object, not an arriving item, a construct, green light hard, in the exact three-dimensional shape of the book he'd been trying to summon, rendered in perfect detail, hovering 3 feet away. Harry looked at it. He reached forward and took it. The construct was solid under his hand, not the papery softness of actual parchment but the specific solidity of hardlight, the quality that constructs had when they were made with very precise intent. He opened it. The pages turned. The text was accurate, reproduced exactly, every word of the third-year Charms textbook rendered in green-lit detail that his eyes read without difficulty. He sat in the dark and read his construct book for 20 minutes before he fully processed what had happened. The ring had interpreted his intent to summon the book as an intent to access the information in the book. The wand had channeled that intent through the summoning charms mechanism. The result was neither a summoned physical object nor a standard ring construct but something in between, information made material through the confluence of two different systems of power. He told Hermione in the morning. She sat on the edge of her chair with the intensity of someone receiving data that reorganized large sections of their understanding. It's synthesized, she said. The two systems, they're not just coexisting, they're synthesizing. Creating outputs neither could produce independently. Yes, Harry said. What else has it done? Just that, so far. But the frequency is settling, every time I use them close together, the harmony is more stable. Less effort to maintain. He paused. It's like they're learning each other. Harry, Hermione said carefully. I've been reading about magical confluence, it's theoretical, barely documented, mostly in pre-modern texts. The idea that two separate magical systems can harmonize in a single practitioner. It's considered impossible in modern theory because no one has ever had access to two independent systems simultaneously. Until now, Harry said. Until now, she agreed. And theoretical texts suggest that full confluence, not just harmony but full merger, produces outputs that neither system can predict or contain. She looked at him. I'm not saying that to frighten you. You're not frightening me, Harry said. You're informing me, which is different. Good. She had a small notebook out now. I want to document everything. Every time the two interact unexpectedly, I want a description. What you intended, what happened, what the output was. "All right," Harry said. "Starting with this morning," she said, and her quill was already moving. March arrived cold and purposeful, and with it a change in the castle's rhythm that Harry noticed the way he noticed most things, through the ring's continuous environmental read, which tracked ambient magical levels the way a barometer tracks pressure. The overall level was rising slightly. Not alarmingly, but measurably, and consistently, and the direction of the rise was concentrated around the third-floor corridor. Quirrell was spending time there at night. Harry tracked the signature moving through the school in the small hours, twice through the third-floor door, both times retreating before the first protection. Testing. Recalculating. The patience of whatever lived in him was extraordinary, but patience has a limit, and the ring's analysis of the secondary signature's degradation suggested that limit was approaching. The suppression charms were failing faster now. By April, they would be too thin to maintain the performance. By April, Quirrell would have to move. Harry adjusted his timeline accordingly. He also adjusted his approach to defense against the dark arts, which had been a careful balancing act since September. Quirrell's classes were not good, not because he was a bad teacher per se but because everything he did was conducted through the medium of a man who was thinking about something else entirely. His anxious professor performance had a quality of maintenance about it, like a machine running on reduced power. Harry paid attention anyway, because the ring had logged every spell Quirrell used in class, and the spells were interesting regardless of the instructor. He took notes. He asked questions. He performed the role of attentive student with genuine effort, not because he was hiding anything but because the material was worth his time. Quirrell watched the ring in every class. He was getting bolder about it, less covert in the watching, the hunger less contained. Harry let him watch. He kept his own expression neutral and his ring's output at its usual background level and gave Voldemort nothing to read. Except once. In early March, during a practical session on defensive shields, Quirrell demonstrated a basic shield charm and asked the class to replicate it. Harry raised his wand. He felt the ring pulse in harmony. He thought, very precisely and deliberately, about the shield charm, not as an exercise but as a real barrier, built with real intent, because the ring had no interest in performing things that weren't genuine. The shield he produced was approximately 3 times the standard diameter. It was also faintly green. It hummed when Quirrell tested it with a probing charm, the way a tuning fork hums when you strike it, a clear, resonant note that Quirrell felt through his wand rather than hearing. The class stopped. Everyone looked at Harry's shield. Quirrell stood very still. Harry felt the secondary signature surge, not suppressed at all for 1 full second, raw and awake and reading him with a focus that was precise and ancient and deeply familiar with power in all its forms. It lasted 1 second. Then the suppression charms clamped back down and Quirrell was just Quirrell again, anxious and adjusting his turban. But in that second, Harry had read back. The secondary signature, unfiltered, not a ghost, not a rumor. A genuine piece of Voldemort's soul, damaged and compressed and furious, but real. Real and aware and very specifically aware of the ring. The read it had done was not casual. It was a full tactical assessment, depth, power, origin, vulnerability. The same thing Harry did to his opponents in ring combat training. Voldemort had been analyzing the ring for 6 months. And in that one unguarded second, Harry had analyzed back. He lowered his shield. "Sorry," he said, to no one in particular. "I put too much in." Quirrell turned away. His hands were slightly unsteady. Harry filed what he'd learned. The vulnerability he'd read in that second, the thing Voldemort's fragment was protecting, the thing it most feared losing, was not the stone. He'd assumed the stone was the priority, and it was, but underneath the stone objective was something more fundamental, continuity. The fragment feared dissolution. The suppression charms weren't just containing it, they were sustaining it. If they failed too fast, the fragment might dissolve before it could use the stone. Which meant Quirrell had to move soon. Had to move before the charms failed fully. Harry went back to his desk and added a notation to his mental timeline, sooner than April. Possibly late March. He was right by 8 days. Ron made the connection between Quirrell's behavior and the timeline on his own, which Harry noted with satisfaction because Ron had been doing that more lately, making the connection himself rather than waiting for Harry or Hermione to share it. His strategic mind, which he applied to chess with such ease, was beginning to apply itself to other boards. "He's getting worse," Ron said at dinner on the 3rd week of March. He said it quietly, looking at the staff table, where Quirrell was doing his reduced power maintenance performance while his food went mostly untouched. "And Dumbledore's been away twice this week." McGonagall mentioned it. "She did?" Hermione said. "She was talking to Flitwick in the corridor outside Charms," Ron said. "She said something about him being called to London and being more careful about timing." He looked at Harry. She sounded worried. Harry looked at the staff table. Dumbledore was present tonight, which the ring confirmed, and was currently talking to McGonagall with the focused attention of someone processing concerning information. His emotional register, which the ring could only read in broad spectrum at this distance, had something in it that Harry read as heightened alertness, which was different from his usual composed warmth. Dumbledore had received Harry's message. He was monitoring. He was not, apparently, monitoring closely enough, or he was monitoring and choosing to let things develop, which was a more unsettling possibility but felt consistent with what Harry understood about how Dumbledore thought. "He's setting the board," Harry said. "Dumbledore?" Hermione asked. "He knows Quirrell is compromised," Harry said. "He's left the stone accessible enough to be a lure while protecting it sufficiently to stop an unworthy attempt. He's pulled back from the castle twice this week, not because London called him, or not only because London called him. He looked at his food. He wants someone to make the attempt. He wants the stone to be challenged. So the protections are still a test," Hermione said. "Not just a test," Harry said. "A resolution. Whatever comes through those chambers either succeeds and reveals itself as the threat, or fails and is contained." He paused. He hasn't fully accounted for Quirrell's timeline. He thinks he has more time than he does. "How much time do we have?" Ron asked. Harry looked at the ring. "Days," he said. "Less than a week." Ron pushed his food around his plate with the expression of someone organizing internal resources. "Right," he said. "Okay." He looked up. "I want to walk the chess sequence again." "Tonight," Harry said. "After curfew." Ron nodded. He picked up his fork and ate with the focused calm of someone who had decided that the best response to impending danger was to eat properly first, which Harry respected enormously. They walked the logical layout of the chess layer in the 3rd-floor corridor that night, not going all the way down, just studying the trap door and the spatial dimensions of what would follow it, Hermione reading from the notes she'd compiled, Ron talking through the chess geometry with the fluency of a native language. He mapped the expected piece arrangement from the room's dimensions and the convention for protective chess enchantments in historical magical literature, which was apparently a thing Hermione had found in a reference text. "Pawns in the standard defensive formation," Ron said, "in the corridor. Which means the attack vector is through the bishop's diagonal. The queen will be the primary threat, she always is in enchanted chess, because she has the most autonomy. You don't beat her with force." He looked at the wall, thinking through it. "You beat her by giving her something to protect." "How?" Hermione asked. "You sacrifice something valuable," Ron said. "On the right square, you force her to stay back. She's programmed to protect the king, that's the enchantment's core logic. If something valuable is on a square she needs to defend, she stays there." He paused. "We play the endgame from the opening. We give her what she wants, so she stays where we need her." Harry looked at him. "You've been thinking about this since September." "Since I found out there was a chess layer," Ron said. "Yeah. You didn't mention it." You didn't ask about the chess specifically, Ron said. You asked what I knew about the castle. This is, he gestured, more abstract. Tell me everything you've worked out, Harry said. Ron talked for 20 minutes. Hermione took notes. By the end of it, Harry had a complete tactical picture of the chess layer that he was confident Ron could navigate, not just navigate but control, directing the game with the precision and speed that his natural chess intelligence allowed. He thought, Ron Weasley has been solving this problem quietly for months because it was his problem to solve and nobody needed to know he was working on it. He thought, this is what loyalty looks like when it has competence behind it. Not helpfulness. Capability. Ron, Harry said. Yeah. When this is over, I want to watch you play a serious match. Not a casual one. A real one. Ron looked at him. Why? Because I want to see you play like this, Harry said, indicating everything Ron had just laid out, the whole board in his head. You play like the ring constructs, not from the surface but from the structure. Ron was quiet for a moment, with the particular silence of someone receiving a compliment so specific it bypasses the usual deflection. Then, you're weird, he said. But thanks. You're welcome, Harry said. For days before the end of March, Quirrell suppression charms hit critical degradation. Harry felt it through the ring in the middle of the night, not a sound, not a visual, but a change in the castle's magical environmental read, a shift in the signature coming from the floor above. The secondary source was bleeding through the charms now, no longer contained but spreading, and the quality of it was no longer merely hungry. It was urgent. Whatever was left of Voldemort in that skull had decided the moment was now and was pushing toward it with everything the fragmented consciousness had. Harry sat up in his bed in the dark dormitory. Around him, Ron and Neville and the others were sleeping. He sat still for 3 seconds, running the ring's data, confirming what he was reading. Quirrell was awake. Moving. Not in his quarters. Harry got up. He dressed in 30 seconds and had his ring at full output by the time he reached the dormitory door. He knocked on Ron's bed frame twice, sharply, and said in a low voice, "Now." Then he went to the common room to wait, knowing that Hermione would already be there because Hermione had been sleeping with her shoes on for a week. She was there. She had the notes and a small bag of items she'd prepared, potions ingredients she thought might be useful, a reference text, 2 spare wands she'd borrowed from the practice supply without technically having permission to borrow them. "Now," she said. "Now," Harry said. The ring was doing something new. It was reading the secondary signature's trajectory through the castle, tracking it toward the 3rd floor with the precision it used for combat tracking. He had a real-time position. Quirrell is 4 minutes ahead of us. Moving toward the corridor. Ron came down the stairs 2 at a time, still straightening his robes, fully awake. He'd grabbed his chess set from beside his bed without Harry asking, which Harry only noticed because a small piece was visible in Ron's jacket pocket. He'd been carrying it to sleep. They went. The corridors at 2 in the morning had the quality of held breath. Portraits slept in their frames. The castle's nighttime sounds, settling stone, distant wind through towers, the particular quiet of a building that had been full of people all day and was now resting, were heightened by the absence of footsteps. Their footsteps were as quiet as they could make them, Harry's ring keeping the automatic noise-dampening field he'd learned to maintain from OA's stealth training. At the 3rd floor corridor they found the door open. The lock was broken, not picked, forced, with more power than precision, the casual force of something that had stopped pretending to be careful. "He's already through," Hermione said. 3 minutes ahead, Harry confirmed. He had to deal with Fluffy. The harp was already there, he planted it earlier. The ring's mapping showed the trapdoor open, no biological signature in the chamber above. "He's in the devil's snare. Which he'll handle easily," Hermione said, with the particular frustration of someone whose preparation has been outpaced by events. "He's a fully trained wizard, even with Voldemort compromised." "Then we move fast," Harry said. He went through the door. They followed. Fluffy was asleep, all three heads, the enchanted harp playing in the corner. The trapdoor was open beneath one enormous paw. Harry looked at Fluffy, massive and sleeping, the size of a house, all that power rendered temporarily harmless by a melody, and thought about what that said about the nature of power and its management. Then he dropped through the trapdoor. The devil's snare chamber was dark and damp and smelled of green things, and the plant's tendrils were already retreating. It had been triggered and released recently, by something that knew how to handle it. Harry felt the plant brush his ankle and produced a shaft of warm light from the ring, not a sunlight construct exactly but close enough that the snare pulled away immediately, hissing in the dark. They moved through. The next chamber, the flying keys, 1,000 of them spinning in the air above a locked door, had a broomstick and a recently broken lock. Quirrell hadn't needed the broomstick. He'd used power to rip the lock. "He's moving fast," Ron said. "Faster than we expected," Harry agreed. "He's not being careful anymore. Whatever patience Voldemort had is gone." The chess chamber was through the next door and it was enormous and stone-cold and the pieces were moving in their starting positions with the slow restlessness of things that expected to be played. Harry looked at the board. He looked at Ron. Ron walked out onto the floor and stood still for 15 seconds, reading the entire board with the same quality of attention Harry brought to combat analysis, total, structural, seeing everything at once. His face had the expression it had in serious games, not tense, not excited. Calm. Completely present. "Quirrell went straight through," Ron said, pointing at a disruption in the piece arrangement on the far side. "He used power to clear a path. The pieces are reset, they reset automatically, but he bypassed the game. He turned. If we do the same thing, we bypass it too. But the game is designed to close the path if someone forces it. There's a secondary enchantment." He pointed at the queen, who was moving with more purposeful aggression than the other pieces, repositioning. "She's on alert." "So we play," Harry said. "We play fast," Ron said. He pointed at positions. "Harry, you're the bishop, there. Hermione, there, knight's starting position. I'll take rook." He was already moving. "We play the endgame from the start. Don't deviate from what I tell you. Move when I say move, to where I say, immediately. No thinking about it." "Understood," Harry said. "Understood," Hermione said, moving to her position. Ron played the game in 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Harry moved when Ron said move and didn't second-guess once, because Ron's voice had the certainty of someone operating at the top of their capability, and operating at the top of your capability in partnership meant trusting the other person's domain absolutely. He took a piece with a sweep of the ring's construct when the bishop needed force to capture rather than just position. Hermione's knight moved with textbook precision through the diagonal Ron had mapped. The queen made her gambit on move 12. She drove toward Ron's rook with the terrifying autonomy of a piece that had genuine tactical intelligence, and Ron sacrificed himself, stepped his rook directly into her path, let the piece take him, stood his ground on the square while the massive obsidian queen swept his piece off the board. And the queen stopped. Turned. Went back to protect the king. Exactly as Ron had planned. The door on the far side of the board opened. Harry was there in 3 seconds. He looked at Ron, who had stepped off the board and was standing with the slightly dazed expression of someone coming back from total concentration. "Good?" Harry asked. "Go," Ron said. "I'll wait here. I can't go further anyway, the door's keyed to the pieces that made it through." He met Harry's eyes. "He's 3 chambers ahead of you. Move." Harry moved. Hermione with him. The troll chamber they ran through, it was already unconscious, dealt with, a heap of grey muscle and bewildered expression against the far wall. Quirrell had not been gentle. Through the door, the potions chamber, glass bottles in a line on a shelf, purple flame at one end and black at the other, an encrypted message on the table. "Logic puzzle," Hermione said immediately, already reading. Which bottle gets you through the black fire, which gets you back through the purple, the clues are in the message. Can you solve it? Harry asked. She read the message. She read it again. Yes, she said, with the crisp certainty of someone who'd been warming up for this specifically. Give me 2 minutes. You have one, Harry said. He's through this one already. Hermione read the message a third time and walked directly to a small bottle on the right of the sequence and held it out. This one forward, she said. There's not enough for both of us. Harry looked at the bottles. He looked at the black fire. He looked at Hermione. There's enough for you to go back, he said. Go back through the purple flame. Help Ron. Wait for Snape. Harry, this is the part the ring solves, Harry said. The stone and whatever's left of Voldemort. That's not a library problem. He picked up the bottle. Go back, Hermione. She looked at him for a moment. The expression she had was not fear for him, not quite. It was the harder thing, confidence in him, real and not performed, with the small grief of someone who knows they can't follow. Be careful, she said. I'm always careful, Harry said. You really aren't, she said, but I'll allow it. She took the return bottle and Harry took the forward one and they drank simultaneously and Harry walked into the black fire. It was cold, not hot. It dissolved the moment he moved through it and he was in the final chamber, where the mirror of Eriste stood in the center of the room on its ornate frame, and before the mirror, with his back to Harry and his arms around his own head in the manner of someone whose internal struggle had become partially external, was Quirinus Quirrell. Harry stood in the entrance to the chamber and assessed the room in 3 seconds. One figure. The mirror. No other exits. The stone was not yet in evidence. Quirrell hadn't reached the mirror's secret yet. The ring pulsed. The wand was in Harry's other hand. He said, in a completely normal voice, "Hello, Professor." Quirrell turned. And Harry saw, for the first time, what Voldemort looked like from the outside when he stopped maintaining the performance. Quirrell's face was not Quirrell's face anymore. The anxiety, the nervous habit, the adjusted turban, all of it had dissolved, and what remained was a vehicle, a body being used with the indifference of something that had no more investment in the vessel's comfort. His eyes had changed quality. Not color, the pupils had a flatness that was not human, a stillness that came from a consciousness that had been disembodied for a decade and had lost, in that decade, most of what made eyes alive. Harry Potter, Quirrell said, but the voice had harmonics it hadn't had before, a second register underneath, dry and cold and ancient. The ring read you in September, Harry said, pleasantly. You've been reading the ring since September. I thought we might as well talk directly. Quirrell's hands came down from his head. He looked at the ring with the hunger Harry had been watching all year, but it was fully unmasked now, absolute, calculating. An extraordinary instrument, the doubled voice said. I had not encountered its type before. It's unique, Harry agreed. What do you want to know about it? The stillness in Quirrell's eyes shifted, something had not expected the directness. What I want, the voice said carefully, is the stone. The ring is, a pause, of interest. The ring doesn't negotiate, Harry said. It's not an instrument you can take. It bonds. If you killed me, it would go dormant and find the next candidate. I'm aware, Voldemort said, through Quirrell's mouth, and the fact that he said I'm aware rather than performing ignorance was interesting. He had done his research. The principles of the own ring system. I investigated them thoroughly when you appeared. A will-based instrument, permanently bonded, activated only by its wearer's free intention. A slight movement in Quirrell's face that was meant to be a smile. But you are 11 years old, and I have spent the better part of a decade reconstituting myself from nothing, and I am considerably more patient than you might assume. You're not patient, Harry said. Your suppression charms have been failing for 2 months. You moved tonight because you had to, not because you chose to. The patience ran out. He watched Quirrell's face. You're not here for the stone because you're ready. You're here because you're running out of time. The doubled voice was silent. I know about Godric's Hollow, Harry said. I know what happened there. I know what you are now, a fragment, a piece, not a whole. And I know that the stone is the only path back to whole that you can see. He looked at Quirrell directly, at the face behind the face. I'm not going to let you have it. You, Voldemort said, are 11 years old. You keep saying that, Harry said. I think it's the most important thing you know about me, which tells me you've significantly underestimated the rest of it. The ring was at full output now, the light from it steady and strong, washing the chamber in green. He had his wand in his other hand. The harmonic between them was running at the highest register he'd felt yet, not the casual blend of proximity, but something purposeful, the two frequencies pulling toward each other like they'd been building to this all year. Step away from the mirror. Quirrell raised his wand. And Voldemort, because he was what he was and had always been what he was, said, kill him. Chapter 5, The Fusion. The first spell Quirrell threw was not a killing curse. It was smart, actually. Harry registered this even as he was moving, because acknowledging intelligence in an opponent was how you avoided being surprised by it. Voldemort knew about the ring. Knew it ran on will and produced hard light constructs. A killing curse against someone carrying that much active willpower was a gamble, and Voldemort did not gamble when he had alternatives. Instead, Quirrell threw a binding hex, dense, dark purple, designed to compress and immobilize rather than destroy, aimed not at Harry's body but at his ring hand. Harry wasn't there when it arrived. He'd moved left the moment Quirrell's wand started to rise, which was before the spell was cast, because the ring's combat tracking read wand position and micro-movement and gave him approximately half a second of predictive data that translated, in practice, to never being exactly where spells expected him to be. The binding hex hit the stone wall behind him and the stone cracked in a way that suggested the hex was considerably more powerful than its name implied. He didn't counterattack immediately. He moved again, right this time, keeping distance, keeping the mirror in his peripheral vision because the mirror was the objective and Quirrell was between him and it and that geometry mattered. The ring was building a real-time spatial map of the chamber with the precision it used for sector combat, positions, trajectories, sight lines, the structural properties of the stone walls and floor and ceiling, the mirror's exact location, the door behind him. Quirrell sent 3 more spells in rapid sequence, adjusting aim faster than a nervous professor should have been able to, because the thing adjusting aim wasn't a nervous professor anymore. The second spell caught Harry's left shoulder and the impact was hard enough to stagger him, not the spell's specific effect. He'd raised a partial shield that absorbed the magical component, but the kinetic force of it, which the shield hadn't been angled to deflect. He stumbled 2 steps and turned it into a forward roll and came up facing Quirrell from a different angle, ring fully extended, and sent a construct, not a weapon, a wall, 20 feet wide and floor to ceiling, directly between Quirrell and the mirror. Quirrell blasted through it. The construct shattered. Harry felt the disruption in his concentration, the way he always felt a shattered construct, not pain exactly, more like the specific dissonance of an intention interrupted. Voldemort's power, channeled through Quirrell, was not what Harry had expected. It was enormous and imprecise, the way damaged things are sometimes powerful precisely because damage removes the inhibitions that normally regulate output. Voldemort's fragment was not careful. It was desperate, and desperation in something of that magnitude was its own kind of force. You're fighting like someone trying to save something, Harry said, from across the chamber. He was keeping his voice conversational, not to provoke but because the ring performed better from a composed state and composure under fire was a choice you made continuously. Every spell is about getting to the mirror. You're not actually trying to kill me. That can change, the doubled voice said. It can, Harry agreed. But it's a real tactical problem for you, isn't it? You need to get to the mirror. Killing me takes power you might need for what comes after. And killing me with my mother's protection still active, he watched Quirrell's face, you know about that. You know what happens when you touch someone protected by sacrificial love. You read the theory before Godric's Hollow. Quirrell had gone still. The hands were shaking, slightly, with the specific tremor of a body under stress it hadn't consented to. That's why no killing curse, Harry said. You can't touch me. You can't risk it. He lowered his wand slightly, not in surrender but in clarity, making the tactical situation explicit. Which means you have to get to that mirror without going through me. I don't need to go through you, Voldemort said, and the voice had dropped the pretense of Quirrell's vocal register entirely. It was coming from the back of the skull now, dry and cold. I need to go around you. And you are 11 years old in a stone chamber with no exits, and every second you spend talking is a second I am thinking. Me too, Harry said. He sent 3 constructs simultaneously, not walls, not weapons, something he developed in OA's advanced training sessions, a concept Kilowog had called compound intent. 3 distinct constructs built on 3 separate intentions running in parallel, each one genuine, each one drawing from a different layer of will. The first was a light construct, bright and directionless, filling the chamber with green that made depth perception unreliable. The second was a sound construct, the low resonant tone that disrupted concentration. CHP had taught him that one, a frequency that interfered with complex spell formulation. The third was structural, a series of thin hard light surfaces at irregular angles across the chamber floor, not high enough to trip but enough to make movement uncertain. Quirrell moved through all 3 with power he should not have had. The light didn't blind him because whatever was looking through those eyes was accustomed to worse, the sound didn't disrupt him because Voldemort's mental discipline was extraordinary even in fragments, and the floor's surfaces he simply burned away with a lateral sweep that turned half of Harry's constructs to nothing. But he'd spent power doing it. Harry felt the chamber's temperature change. The ring's environmental sensors were reading something new, a draw on ambient magical energy, significant, coming from Quirrell. Whatever Voldemort's fragment was doing to maintain its presence in Quirrell's body and project this level of power simultaneously was costing it. The degradation of the suppression charms was accelerating in real time. Harry could read it like a countdown. He pressed. Not with power, he'd been thinking about this for months, and what he'd concluded was that direct power exchange against something as old and damaged and therefore unbounded as Voldemort's fragment was not the optimal approach. Like fighting a flooded river by standing in it. The ring's strength was precision. The ring's strength was the clarity of intention. He raised his wand. The ring pulsed in harmony with it, and the frequency was higher than it had ever been, the 2 instruments pulling toward each other with the urgency of the moment. He felt it in his chest, not the harmonic's usual warmth but something more active, like 2 currents building toward a confluence that the landscape couldn't contain. He cast. It was a shield charm. Technically. Structurally. What came out of the wand was not technically a shield charm, it was a shield charm channeled through the ring's full output with the precision of a construct built on the intention of absolute protection, and the result was a barrier that covered not just Harry but the entire mirror, a dome of green-white light that the ring had built and the wand had formalized into something that existed at the intersection of both systems of power. Quirrell hit it with everything. The collision was enormous. Harry felt it through every point of contact, the ring on his hand, the wand in his other hand, the floor under his feet, the air in his lungs. The dome held. The impact radiated outward in a shockwave that cracked the walls and brought stone dust from the ceiling and knocked Harry back 2 steps, but the dome held, and the mirror was inside it, and Quirrell was outside it. The doubled voice made a sound that was not quite human. You can't maintain that, Voldemort said. The coldness in the voice had developed something Harry identified as genuine assessment. He was recalculating. Your ring channels will. You are one person. I am, considerably more than one person's worth of power, even now. You're a fragment, Harry said, through the effort of maintaining the dome. You're damaged and diminishing and using a borrowed body that can't actually contain what you're trying to push through it. He looked at Quirrell's face, at the trembling, at the thin sheen of something wrong at the edges of his eyes. You're hurting him. Whatever is left of Quirrell in there, you're burning through him. Quirrell made his choice, Voldemort said, dismissively. He made a choice, Harry said. You've made several more since then on his behalf. He held the dome. This isn't winning for you. Every second you push against this, you're spending something you can't get back until you have the stone. You know that. So what's the actual calculation? The doubled voice was quiet. Harry felt the pressure against the dome change, not withdrawn, but altered. Probing rather than battering. Testing for weak points. Harry felt the weak point at the same moment Voldemort found it. The dome's foundation was the ring, but the ring's construct was being formalized through the wand, and the wand's channel was not designed to sustain a construct of this magnitude indefinitely. It was a wand. It was 11 inches of holly and phoenix feather, extraordinary and chosen in his, but it was built for spellwork, and this wasn't spellwork, this was a hybrid that neither instrument had been made to produce alone. He felt the strain in the channel, not in the ring was fine, the ring's output was steady and could sustain this, but in the wand, in the wood, a hairline stress that was growing. He had approximately 40 seconds before the wand's channel fractured under the load. He thought very fast. The mirror was behind him inside the dome. The stone was in the mirror, accessible only to someone who wanted to find it but not use it. Voldemort couldn't pass through the dome. Harry was inside the dome with the mirror. He turned. He looked into the mirror of Eriste. In the mirror, he saw himself. Older, maybe, the same face, but something settled in it that wasn't quite there yet. He was standing with his hand extended, and in his palm was the Philosopher's Stone, a blood-red gem that pulsed with the warmth the ring had been reading from this chamber all year. And in the mirror, he put the stone in his pocket. He didn't use it. He simply put it away and turned, and the mirror Harry looked directly at him, not at the reflection he was standing in, but at him, as if the mirror knew the difference, and the mirror Harry said nothing but the expression was clear, this is what you want. To protect it. To make sure it isn't used. Harry felt a weight in his pocket. He reached in. He pulled out the Philosopher's Stone, red and warm and real, solid in his hand, the artifact of 600 years of Nicholas Flamel's life rendered in a gem the size of a large marble. He held it. He looked at it. He felt the ring reading it, an extraordinary output, the ring's analysis of the stone's magical structure registering as the highest magnitude artifact it had ever encountered, a power density that made everything else in its database look like background noise. He felt absolutely no desire to use it. He put it back in his pocket. 30 seconds on the wand. He turned back to Quirrell. I have the stone, he said. The dome flickered, the wand was failing. He could feel it, the channel narrowing, the construct losing its formalized anchoring. The ring's output was still full, but without the wand's formalization it would revert to pure construct form, which was still formidable but different, and the gap in the transition was a vulnerability. Quirrell had felt the flicker. He hit the dome again, full force, and the dome cracked, not broke, cracked, spiderweb fracture lines in the green-white light, and through the cracks Harry felt the cold of the chamber pressing in. He had a decision to make in approximately 15 seconds. He made it. He released the dome entirely. All at once, deliberately, the full output redirected from sustaining the barrier to something different. He closed both hands, ring and wand together for the first time, right and left, both sources aligned rather than parallel, and thought about what he wanted with the absolute precision that 5 years of ring training had given him. He wanted Voldemort contained. Not destroyed, he didn't know if the fragment could be destroyed, and attempting something he didn't fully understand in a confined stone chamber was not precise. He wanted Voldemort's fragment separated from Quirrell's body in a way that was survivable for Quirrell. He wanted the stone protected. He wanted the chamber sealed. 4 intentions. 1 composite will. Ring and wand simultaneously, not in harmony this time but in merger, the wand's channel and the ring's output overlapping fully, the green-white of the dome now condensed into something smaller and more intense, both hands extended toward Quirrell, both instruments burning at the point of contact between his palms where the ring's field and the wand's output were touching each other for the first time directly. The merger happened between one breath and the next. It wasn't an explosion. It was more like a crack in the air, a sound that wasn't quite sound, a light that wasn't quite light, the kind of event that the ring's sensors registered as undefined output type, insufficient data for classification, which was the closest the ring's analytical systems had ever come to surprise. The wand glowed. Not the green of the ring, not the gold of standard spell output. Something between. The color that lives between green and gold on the spectrum that doesn't have a common name, the frequency that sits at the edge of visible light where the eye starts to feel rather than see. The energy released hit Quirrell in a wave. Quirrell flew back, not violently, not with the force of a curse, but with the irresistible insistence of a tide. He hit the far wall and stayed there, pinned by nothing visible, and the doubled voice screamed, not in pain, though the sound had pain in it, more like the scream of something being separated from something it was holding onto, two hands being pulled apart, the gap widening between them. The secondary signature, Voldemort's fragment, came free. It was visible for a moment. That was the part Harry hadn't expected and would think about for a long time afterward. Voldemort's fragment was visible, briefly, as the merger energy pushed it out of Quirrell's body. Not a body, not a face, not anything solid, a distortion in the air, a shape that the eye tried to resolve into something recognizable and couldn't, a heat shimmer of consciousness that had been alive for decades and had been pieces for 10 years and was now being ejected from the last host it had found. It turned toward Harry. The fragment's attention was a physical sensation, cold, focused, old in a way that had stopped being human before Harry was born. It looked at him, and the ring's red of it was the most complex emotional signature Harry had ever encountered. Fury, yes, but more than fury, a specific recognition that things had not gone the way they were supposed to go and a very specific identification of the reason. Harry. Not the boy who lived. Not the child of prophecy. Not the infant in the cottage at Godric's Hollow. Harry. Specifically, this person, with this ring and this wand and this impossibly composite will, who had walked into this chamber at 11 years old and taken the stone and held the dome and done the merger and been none of the things that had been planned for. The fragment moved toward him. The ring and wand were still merged, Harry could feel them both, running hot in a way that wasn't painful but was serious, the wand's phoenix feather core vibrating at a frequency the wood hadn't been built to contain indefinitely. He raised both hands. He thought one thing, cleanly and completely, not here. Not tonight. Not this person. The light that came out was the between color again, the green-gold edge of the spectrum, and it hit the fragment the way a gale hits smoke. The fragment dissolved, not into nothing, but into dispersion, scattered, reduced from coherent consciousness to diffuse presence that drifted through the chamber walls and was gone. Not destroyed. Dispersed. Sent somewhere that wasn't here, which was the best Harry could manage with what he knew, and he was honest with himself that it was not permanent. But it was enough. The chamber went quiet. Quirrell was on the floor against the far wall. He was breathing, Harry confirmed it immediately, crossing the chamber fast and crouching over him. The doubled signature was gone. Quirrell's magical baseline was his own again, faint and very tired, the reading of someone who had been occupied by something enormously more powerful than themselves and had barely survived the eviction of it. His hands were burning. Harry pulled the sleeve back on one and saw the blackening, the same effect the protection magic had caused on Voldemort's hand at Godric's Hollow. Alive. Damaged. Alive. Harry sat back on his heels. He was in a stone chamber at 2:30 in the morning with an unconscious professor and the philosopher's stone in his pocket and a wand that was, he looked at it, was different. The wand had changed. It was the same object, holly and phoenix feather, but the phoenix feather core was faintly luminescent now, glowing the green-gold color through the wood, visible as a thin line of light running the 11-inch length of it. The ring on his hand had the same color at its center, where the green had always been, now carrying a gold thread through it like a vein in stone. They had merged and separated and what was left of each carried something of the other. Harry turned the wand over. He made a simple construct, just a sphere, nothing complex, and the sphere came out of the wand. Not the ring. The wand. A hard light construct from 11 inches of holly, green gold, solid, rotating above his palm. He looked at it for a long moment. Interesting, he said, to the quiet chamber. Then the door burst open. Snape arrived first, which was what Harry had expected. He came through the doorway with his wand drawn and his robes in disarray and his expression doing several things at once. It arrived at relief and then immediately reorganized itself into composure, the way Snape's face reorganized everything into composure because composure was its default position regardless of incoming information. He looked at the chamber. Quirrell on the floor. Harry crouching over him. The merged wand. The ring. The green gold light still in the air, fading slowly. He's alive, Harry said, before Snape could ask. The fragment separated. Voldemort's dispersed, not gone, not permanently, but not here and not in a host. He looked at Snape. He needs medical attention. The contact with the protection magic burned his hands. Snape crossed the chamber in 5 strides and knelt beside Quirrell with the efficient precision of someone who had been trained in magical injury response and was applying that training rather than his feelings about the patient. He checked Quirrell's pulse, his breathing, ran a diagnostic charm. His expression was controlled but the ring read the emotional undercurrent clearly. Something in Snape had been holding its breath for a very long time and had just, slightly, released. Poppy needs to see him immediately, Snape said. I know, Harry said. He stood. He took the stone from his pocket and held it out to Snape. Snape looked at it. He looked at Harry. Something moved in his expression. I went through the mirror, Harry said. It gave it to me because I wanted to protect it and not use it. I'm giving it to you because you'll get it to the headmaster faster than I can, and its security arrangement needs to be reconsidered given that a fragment of Voldemort got all the way to the final chamber. He paused. Also it belongs to Nicholas Flamel and Flamel should probably decide what happens to it next. Snape took the stone. He held it in his palm and looked at it and then closed his fingers around it. He looked at Harry. You went through all of the protections, Snape said. It was not a sentence with a question in it. Ron handled the chess, Harry said. Hermione handled the potion's logic. The rest, he indicated the chamber. Snape looked at the wand. At the ring. At the between color still fading in the air. What happened here, he said, and it was genuinely a question, not rhetorical, not challenging. The ring and the wand merged, Harry said. Briefly. Under pressure. The output separated the fragment from Quirrell and dispersed it. He looked at his wand. They haven't fully separated back. I can see that, Snape said. It's not, I don't think it's dangerous, Harry said. The ring's analysis reads it as stable. A permanent partial integration rather than a temporary resonance. He paused. I'll need to understand it better. Yes, Snape said. You will. He stood, Quirrell's shoulder under his hand ready to move him. Go back to your dormitory, Potter. Hermione and Ron are, Mr. Weasley is in the chess chamber and Miss Granger is in the potions chamber and both are perfectly unharmed, Snape said, with the specific knowledge of someone who had already checked on his way through. I told them to go to the infirmary and they are currently debating whether to listen. Harry almost smiled. They won't listen. No, Snape said. He looked at Harry one more time. The ring read the emotional register, the grief-shaped thing was still present, but there was something alongside it now. Not warmth, Snape was not a warm man and was not going to become one, but something more like acknowledgement. A recognition of something real. Go, Snape said. The headmaster will want to speak with you in the morning. Harry went back through the chambers. Devil's Snare, keys, the great sleeping chess board with the pieces reset and waiting, the troll chamber, the trap door, Fluffy sleeping under his harp. He emerged into the third-floor corridor and found Ron and Hermione exactly where Snape had predicted, not in the infirmary, standing in the corridor with an argument they were apparently having with some enthusiasm. They stopped when they saw him. Ron looked at the wand. At the ring. At the green gold light thread running through both. Well, Ron said. That's different. Something happened, Hermione said immediately, and she wasn't asking. A great deal happened, Harry said. Are you both all right? Fine, Ron said. Hermione cried a bit. I did not cry, Hermione said, with the specific heat of someone who did cry and has made peace with it but is not going to accept it being announced. I was concerned. She was definitely concerned, Ron agreed, with diplomacy. Harry looked at both of them. He felt the stone's absence from his pocket. He'd given it to Snape and the giving had felt correct, clean, the right thing in the right place. He felt the wand's new weight, the feather core glowing through the wood. He felt the ring's usual steady pulse and the gold thread in it that was new. He felt, bone deep, the specific tiredness that came after something genuinely serious had required everything you had, and the specific aliveness that followed it, the feeling of having been tested by the actual thing and found that you were more than adequate. Let's go up, he said. They went. Dumbledore came to the infirmary the next morning, where Madame Pomfrey had installed Harry despite his insistence that he was uninjured. She had looked at the wand and the ring with the expression of someone who was a medical professional first and had opinions about what constituted injury that were broader than the merely physical, and had put him in a bed and given him something to drink and told him that what she said went, at least in this wing. Harry had drunk the thing. It tasted like ginger and sleep. He hadn't slept. Dumbledore arrived at 7:15. He looked, Harry thought, like someone who had been awake for most of the night as well, not disheveled. Dumbledore was never disheveled, but with the quality of very precise composure that people project when they're maintaining it rather than resting in it. His half-moon glasses caught the morning light. His robes were deep blue, the color of late evening sky, and his eyes were sharp and warm and doing the careful two-layer thing they always did with Harry, seeing him and assessing him simultaneously. He sat in the chair beside Harry's bed. He looked at the wand in Harry's hand. Harry was sitting up, had been sitting up, had been turning the wand over and running small tests since 5 in the morning. He looked at the ring. He looked at the green gold thread. May I? He said, and extended his hand toward the wand. Harry held it out. Dumbledore took it with the careful grip of someone handling something they were uncertain about. He turned it over. He held it close to his face and looked at the core through the wood. His expression was extraordinary, complex and layered and performing none of it, just genuinely complex in the way that genuine things are. The phoenix feather, he said softly. Yes, Harry said. Fawkes's feather, Dumbledore said. Not a question. Harry had not known that. He felt the information settle. Fawkes, Dumbledore's phoenix, whose feather was also in Voldemort's wand, whose feather was now in both wands in some sense, because the ring had carried something of Voldemort's power when it dispersed the fragment. 3 instruments with Fawkes at their root. I didn't know that, Harry said. Ollivander told you the feather came from a phoenix that gave only 2, Dumbledore said. He did not tell you the phoenix's name. He set the wand down on the bed. He looked at Harry with the warm, careful eyes. Tell me what happened. Harry told him. All of it, the months of tracking, Quirrell's degradation timeline, the 3 of them going through the chambers, the dome, the decision to merge rather than sustain. The fragments' dispersal. What the ring had read in that final moment. Dumbledore listened without interrupting. His hands were folded in his lap and his face was still, and when Harry finished there was a silence that had texture, the silence of a very old, very intelligent person processing information that reorganized large sections of what they thought they knew. You've been tracking Quirrell since September, Dumbledore said. Yes, Harry said. I sent you a message in January. You did, Dumbledore said. I received it. I made decisions based on it that, he paused, and something in his expression did something that Harry recognized because he'd seen it in Snape's face the night before, acknowledgement. Decisions that assumed more time than was available. And assumed, another pause, longer, assumed a more limited version of you than was accurate. You built the protections as a test, Harry said. Dumbledore did not look away. I built them as protections, he said. And as a test. Both things were true. I expected the test to reveal the threat, to show me what I was dealing with in Quirrell, in a context where I could control the outcome. He looked at his hands. I did not anticipate that the test would be passed before I arrived to observe it. The protections were excellent, Harry said. Each one required a specific competence. They would have stopped anyone who was simply powerful or simply clever. They would not stop someone who was both, and who had two friends who were also each of those things. Dumbledore looked at him. You're generous with the credit. I'm accurate with it, Harry said. Ron solved the chess. Hermione solved the logic. Without them, the stone would have still been accessible through Quirrell's brute force approach, because the protections are built to be bypassed by the worthy, and I'm not certain Voldemort in a full body wouldn't have been considered worthy by several of the layers. That, Dumbledore said, slowly, is an uncomfortable observation. It's an accurate one, Harry said. The protections are in Hogwarts, where children are. A protection designed to be passed by the sufficiently capable is only as secure as your assessment of who is sufficiently capable. He met Dumbledore's eyes. The stone should go back to Flamel. Its security cannot depend on puzzle locks in a school. I agree, Dumbledore said. He said it without hesitation, which meant he'd already reached the same conclusion and the concession was genuine rather than performed. Arrangements are being made. They were quiet for a moment. The infirmary was warming in the morning light. Somewhere down the wing, Quirrell was in a bed with Madame Pomfrey working on his hands, and what Harry suspected was a considerably more complicated internal situation that no healing spell covered. The wand, Dumbledore said. And the ring. They're integrated, Harry said. Not fully merged. But the wand carries something of the ring's capability now, and the ring carries something of the wand's formalization. He turned the wand over again. I need to understand it properly. I'd like access to restricted magical theory texts, specifically pre-modern confluence theory and anything related to cross-system magical integration. Dumbledore looked at him. You're asking for access to the restricted section. I'm asking for access to the texts I need to understand what I am now, Harry said. Which is different from the restricted section for its own sake. Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. His expression had that two-layer quality again, but the assessment layer was doing something different than usual, not calculating what Harry was worth or what Harry could be used for, but simply seeing what was there and trying to understand it. Albus, Harry said, and Dumbledore's expression shifted at the name, not offended, something more like startled. I know you've been planning around me for a long time. I know there's a prophecy, and I know it says something about me and Voldemort that you've been treating as a fixed point in your planning. He looked at his wand. The fragment dispersed last night. It isn't gone. I was honest with Snape about that, and I'm being honest with you. Voldemort will reconstitute. What he is now, after the merger energy hit him, I don't fully know. The ring's data suggests he's more dispersed than before, but the fragment wasn't destroyed. He looked up. When he comes back, I want to face him as what I am. Not as what a prophecy says I am. Dumbledore looked at him for a long time. The warm eyes were doing something complicated. And what are you? He said softly. I'm a Green Lantern, Harry said. I'm a wizard. I'm the son of James and Lily Potter. I'm the friend of Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger. I am 11 years old, and I've been trained for 5 years by some of the most capable beings in this galaxy. He looked at Dumbledore steadily. I'm not a piece on your board, Albus. I'm willing to be your ally. That's not the same thing. The silence that followed was the longest of any they'd had. Then Dumbledore did something Harry hadn't expected. He smiled, not the warm, performative smile, not the headmaster's smile, but something smaller and more genuine, the smile of a man who has been surprised by something and is honest enough to show it. Lily's eyes, he said, quietly and to himself. Then, collecting himself, the headmaster's composure returning but softer than before, the performance thinner, you will have access to any text you require. I would ask, in return, that you share what you learn about the confluence with me. Not for planning purposes. A pause. Out of genuine curiosity. I've been studying magic for over a century, Harry. I have never seen what happened in that chamber before. Neither has the ring, Harry said. It classified the output as undefined. Dumbledore's eyes lit. It was the specific lighting of someone for whom mystery is not a threat but a homecoming. Undefined, he said. First time in its operational history, Harry said. Then we have, Dumbledore said, a great deal to learn. Together, if you're willing. He extended his hand, not as a headmaster to a student but as the gesture meant it. An offer. A choice. Harry looked at the hand. He thought about Kilowog on the landing platform. About the Burrow's kitchen clock with his name on it. About Ron losing his rook and Hermione handing him the forward bottle with complete confidence. About Snape's face when he said don't do anything reckless and meant something more than that. He shook Dumbledore's hand. Together, he said. But I make my own moves. Understood, Dumbledore said. And he meant it, which was the most important thing. Ron found Harry at lunch, back at the Gryffindor table, which Madame Pomfrey had permitted at 11 with the specific instruction that he eat something substantial and rest afterward. He sat down and put a plate in front of Harry without asking whether Harry was hungry, because Harry was always hungry after something serious and Ron had noticed that in September. Dumbledore talked to you, Ron said. This morning, Harry said. And? We have an arrangement, Harry said. I think it'll hold. He looked at Ron. How's the wrist? Fine, Ron said. Got a bruise where the Queen got me but I've had worse from Fred. He looked at the wand. It's still doing the light thing. It'll probably always do the light thing now, Harry said. The green gold? Ron tilted his head. Doesn't look bad, actually. Distinctive. Everything about you is distinctive, Hermione said, appearing on Harry's other side with a plate of her own and the look of someone who had been in the library since 8 in the morning. I found 3 pre-modern texts on confluence theory. They're mostly theoretical but one of them, Benedictus of Ravenclaw, 14th century, describes something he calls twin source synthesis that might be what you've done. She opened a notebook. He says, and I'm translating from the Latin, when two instruments of will find their common purpose, neither is diminished by the meeting, each is expanded by what the other knows. Harry looked at the wand in his hand. At the ring on his finger. 2 instruments of will, he said. Finding their common purpose, Hermione said. Ron was watching them both with the expression he had during chess endgames, relaxed, seeing the whole board. So you're more powerful than before, he said. Different, Harry said. More integrated. Whether more powerful is, I'd need to test it carefully. He thought about the chamber. About the dome holding, and the merger, and the between color, and Voldemort's fragment turning toward him at the end with that specific recognition. Voldemort knows what I am now, he said. Whatever comes next, he'll plan around the ring and the wand both. Then we plan around him planning around it, Ron said, simply, and picked up his fork. Hermione made a note in her notebook. Harry ate. The great hall hummed with its usual lunchtime noise, hundreds of students, the enchanted ceiling showing a high spring sky, blue and clear over Scotland, and from somewhere near the Ravenclaw table came an argument about the proper technique for a switching spell that had the comfortable heat of people who cared about getting things right. Harry looked at the wand. He made a small construct, a spiral galaxy, the same one he'd made the very first night, in the cupboard at Privet Drive. Green gold now, the colors woven together, each arm rendered with the accuracy of the ring's astronomical database and something else, something that came from the wand's phoenix core, a warmth in the light that the ring alone had never produced. He held it out above the table. It rotated. Ron and Hermione watched it. Andromeda? Ron said. Yes, Harry said. 2.5 million light-years away. And on a collision course, Hermione said. But not for 4 billion years. Right, Harry said. He let it dissolve. He picked up his fork. Plenty of time. Outside, the grounds were green with early spring and the lake was silver under the high sky, and the castle rose behind them with its centuries of compressed intention, its wards nested like rings of a tree, its secrets in their chambers, and 3 floors of empty protection rooms waiting to be reset. Inside, at the Gryffindor table, 3 11-year-olds finished their lunch. Chapter 6, Overture for a New Map. The Guardians of OA arrived on a Thursday. Harry knew they were coming before they arrived. The ring had flagged an incoming sector transit at 6 in the morning, the specific energy signature of a own vessel moving through the upper atmosphere with its stealth field active, which was thorough enough to be invisible to conventional detection but not to the ring of a Green Lantern who was paying attention. He finished breakfast, told Ron and Hermione he'd explain later, and was standing on the front steps of the castle by the time the delegation materialized on the lawn. There were 3 of them. The Guardians were small, physically small, ancient and blue-skinned with enormous eyes that contained the specific quality of very old things that had decided to stop being surprised by anything. They wore their formal robes, which meant this was official. Behind them stood 2 senior lanterns Harry didn't know by name but recognized by sector designation from the core database, both in full uniform, both reading the castle's magical architecture with the same surprise the ring had registered in its first week. Ganthet stepped forward. He was the most recognizably individual of the Guardians. The others maintained the collective composure of an institution, but Ganthet had something in him that was slightly warmer, slightly more present, a Guardian who had spent enough time watching individual people to have developed opinions about them. He looked at Harry. He looked at the wand. He looked at the ring, which was carrying its green-gold thread now with complete normalcy, as though it had always been this color and the change was simply the ring settling into its final form. Lantern Potter, Ganthet said. Guardian, Harry said. You've been busy, Ganthet said. It was not a criticism. It had the quality of an observation being made by someone who had received a very detailed incident report and wanted to cross-reference it against the actual source. Somewhat, Harry said. One of the senior lanterns, a tall, silver-skinned woman with the insignia of Sector 2814's adjacent sector on her uniform, was looking at the castle with an expression that was trying to be professional and not entirely succeeding. The ring was mapping the ambient magic coming off the building, and whatever her own instrument was doing, it was clearly producing similar data and she was processing it with visible effort. The castle is significant, Harry said to her. The castle, she said carefully, is radiating at a magical output equivalent to a minor star formation. How is it not visible from orbit? The wards contain the output, Harry said. Muggle repulsion charms, unplottability enchantments, about 300 years of layered concealment magic. He paused. The wizarding world has been operating at this energy level for centuries without anyone looking. We looked, the other lantern said, shorter, broader, with the patient face of someone who had been doing this work for a very long time. In 1743. Filed it as non-threatening ambient energy concentration and moved on. I know, Harry said. I found the report. This produced a silence among the delegation. Ganthet looked at Harry with something that might have been amusement if Guardians did amusement, which they officially did not. May we come inside? Ganthet asked. I've arranged a room, Harry said. But the headmaster will want to be present. We expected that, Ganthet said. He may find this meeting surprising, Harry said. He's very good at not showing it, but I'd rather prepare him first. He looked at Ganthet. Give me 10 minutes. Ganthet inclined his head. Harry turned and went back into the castle and found Dumbledore, who was already in the entrance hall, standing at the window that looked out over the lawn with his hands folded behind his back and his expression doing the very composed thing it did when something was happening that he hadn't anticipated. Aliens, Dumbledore said, to the window. The Guardians of OA, Harry said. My commanding authority, technically. 3 Guardians and 2 Senior Lanterns. They've come about the ring merger event. He stood beside Dumbledore and looked out at the lawn where the delegation was waiting with the patient stillness of entities for whom 5 minutes was an entirely negligible unit of time. Ganthet is the one in the center. He's the most reasonable of them. The others are institutional. And institutional means? Dumbledore said. It means they have rules and the rules are old and they believe in them the way very old institutions believe in their rules, Harry said. Some of the rules are good. Some are procedural relics. The challenge is telling the difference. Dumbledore turned to look at him, with the expression he'd been developing since the morning after the stone incident, less chess master, more genuine. You've been navigating this for 5 years. Yes, Harry said. It's not different from what you do. He met Dumbledore's eyes. We both run on ancient institutions that we believe in and push back against simultaneously. Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. Then, let's go meet them, he said. You can translate. I can translate, Harry said. Though they speak English perfectly. I didn't mean the language, Dumbledore said. The meeting took place in a ground-floor classroom that McGonagall had cleared on Harry's request without asking why, which was its own kind of trust. The Guardians sat on one side of the long table. Dumbledore sat on the other side with McGonagall and Snape, who had arrived without being asked because Snape arrived for things that mattered without waiting for invitations. Harry sat at the end, between both groups. The 2 Senior Lanterns stood near the door. They were there officially as escort. Unofficially, Harry suspected, they were there because the Guardians had wanted people in the room who had actual field experience and therefore actual opinions about what the ring merger meant. Ganthet placed a small crystalline device on the table. It activated, projecting a holographic record, the ring's data from the night of the stone incident, the energy readings from the moment of merger, the output signature, the between-color spectral analysis. It rotated in the air above the table in green-gold light, and everyone on both sides of the table looked at it. This event, Ganthet said, is unprecedented in the operational history of the Green Lantern Corps. The ring merger that Lantern Potter experienced generated an energy output that our sensors registered from orbit. He looked at Harry. We need to understand what happened. So do I, Harry said. Completely. That's why I'd like the Corps' full theoretical database on confluence events, any documented cases of ring interaction with non-standard energy sources, and access to OA's pre-modern records on human magical tradition. The briefer of the 2 lanterns made a sound. It wasn't a word. It was the sound of someone who had expected to be running this meeting and was discovering that was not the arrangement. Lantern Potter, the taller lantern said, carefully, the standard protocol for an unclassified ring event is a full debrief on OA, a temporary ring suspension pending analysis, and, no, Harry said. A pause. I'm sorry, the lantern said. Ring suspension isn't happening, Harry said pleasantly. The ring is bonded. It doesn't suspend. If you tried to pull it back, you'd get dormancy and a new search for candidates, and the search would probably bring it back to me anyway because the bonding at this depth doesn't dissolve at the Guardian's convenience. He looked at the lantern without hostility. I understand the protocol. The protocol was written for standard bonding cases. This isn't a standard bonding case. We both know that. The lantern looked at Ganthet. Ganthet was looking at Harry with those ancient eyes that had stopped being surprised. Continue, he said. The merger happened under specific conditions, Harry said. High-stress combat, both instruments at maximum output, a direct threat that required a response neither system could produce independently. The ring and wand didn't merge because I chose to merge them, they merged because the intention behind both was identical and the systems found the most efficient path to expressing that intention. He paused. The ring does what it does. My wand does what it does. When the intention was unified enough and the pressure was sufficient, the systems recognized each other. That's not a malfunction. It's also not in the manual, the shorter lantern said. His voice was dry and unexpectedly wry, the voice of someone who had been in the Corps long enough to find institutional bureaucracy gently absurd. Very little about this posting is in the manual, Harry said. I'm on a planet with ambient magical energy equivalent to a minor star formation, carrying 2 instruments that have now integrated, in a school full of children who can reshape reality through focused intent using sticks. He let that sit for a moment. Sector 2814 required updating. Snape, at his end of the table, made a very small sound. Harry didn't look at him. Dumbledore's expression had the warmth of someone who was genuinely enjoying watching something and had decided not to pretend otherwise. The tall lantern crossed her arms. The integration is stable, she said, and now her voice was professional rather than procedural, the field officer coming forward. Completely, Harry said. The ring's self-diagnostic reads all systems nominal. The wand's channel is modified but structurally sound. Ollivander should examine it, and I'd like to arrange that, but functionally it's performing correctly. He looked at Ganthet. I want to understand what I'm carrying. All of it. The Corps' resources and the Wizarding World's resources both, applied to the same question. That requires cooperation between both institutions. He looked from Ganthet to Dumbledore. Which is also unprecedented. Unprecedented has been the theme of this academic year, Dumbledore said. It's going to continue being the theme, Harry said. Voldemort's fragment dispersed but not destroyed. He'll reconstitute. When he does, he'll know about the merger. He'll build his approach around it. I need to know what the approach can do before he knows better than I do. The room was quiet with the specific quality of large things settling. Ganthet picked up the crystalline device. He looked at the green-gold hologram for a moment, the spectral analysis rotating, the output signature that the ring had classified as undefined. He looked at Harry with those still, ancient eyes. You are 12 years old, he said. In 2 weeks, Harry said. Yes. The youngest lantern in 800 years, Ganthet said. Recruited at 6. Trained by Kilowog. He paused. Kilowog told us when you left for Earth that you were the most naturally capable recruit he had trained in 3 centuries. He said, his exact words, don't get in his way. That sounds like Kilowog, Harry said. It does, Ganthet agreed. We weren't entirely sure what he meant. He set the device down. We understand now. He looked at Dumbledore. Headmaster. Your institution and ours have operated in adjacent space, different definitions of space, for centuries without interaction. I believe that period is ending. I believe you're right, Dumbledore said, and there was something in his voice, the tone of a man at the edge of a new chapter who finds it more interesting than frightening. I'd welcome the conversation, if you're willing. We're willing, Ganthet said. He looked at Harry. The database access you requested. The pre-modern records. You'll have them. He paused. In return, I'd ask that you document everything. Every development in the integration. Every new capability, every anomalous output. Not for control, for understanding. I was already doing that, Harry said. Hermione's been documenting since February. Ganthet looked at him. Miss Granger, he said, and it was not a question, he'd read the incident reports, clearly. Your team. My friends, Harry said. Your friends, Ganthet agreed, with a slight inflection that made the word mean exactly what Harry meant by it. The Corps does not officially recognize non-lantern team deployments. I know, Harry said. We may need to revisit that, Ganthet said. He stood, which indicated the formal portion of the meeting was concluded. Lantern Potter. The Corps will be in contact. More frequently than before, I think. I'd like that, Harry said, and meant it. After the delegation left, their ship departing the upper atmosphere with the discretion of something that had been doing covert planetary observation for millennia, McGonagall made tea. It was the most McGonagall response to an alien diplomatic meeting that Harry could have imagined, and he found it deeply reassuring. She set 5 cups on the cleared table with the efficiency of someone who had decided that extraordinary circumstances still required ordinary comfort, and everyone sat back down with a slightly different configuration, less formal, the institutional distances compressed by the fact that something significant had just happened, and significant things tend to reorganize the furniture of a room. "Well," McGonagall said. "Indeed," Dumbledore said. Snape was looking at his tea with the expression of a man who had been present for an unprecedented meeting between 2 entirely separate magical traditions and was sorting his feelings about it into the correct internal filing system. "The Guardians," he said, "are smaller than I expected." "Most things of great power are," Harry said. "True," Snape said, with a glance that might, from a different face, have constituted a compliment. McGonagall was watching Harry with the expression she'd had since September, the one that carried something of Lily Potter in it, the specific warmth of someone who recognized something and didn't want to make it formal by naming it. "The access you negotiated," she said. "The database. The pre-modern records." "I'll share everything relevant," Harry said. "Particularly anything that might help understand the Wizarding World's energy signature from a wider framework. The Ring's been building a map of the castle's magical architecture since September. The data might be useful for the school's own research." McGonagall looked at Dumbledore. Dumbledore looked at his tea. He was smiling the small, genuine smile. "He offered before we asked," he said. "I wasn't bargaining," Harry said. "Information that's useful to people should go to those people. That's not a strategy, it's basic sense." "Basic sense," Snape said, "is considerably rarer than it should be." They drank their tea. Outside the window, the spring grounds were brilliant in the morning light, and the lake was doing something extraordinary with the reflection of clouds, and 3 first-years had been listed in the morning's Madame Pomfrey release log as cleared for full activity, which meant by now Ron and Hermione were either in the library or on the grounds, and probably both. Ron was on the grounds, playing chess against himself on a flat stone near the lake, which he did when he was thinking. The pieces moved with the grumbling compliance of enchanted objects that found solo play philosophically unsatisfying but were willing to make an exception. Hermione was at his elbow with a notebook, writing, occasionally looking up at the lake with the expression of someone whose thoughts had gone somewhere interesting, and she was giving them room. Harry came down from the castle and sat on the stone across from Ron's board. The pieces registered his presence and reorganized hopefully. "Don't look at me," Harry told them. "I lose every time." "You lose every time against me," Ron said, moving a knight without looking up. "You'd beat most people." "High praise from you," Harry said. "It's accurate praise," Ron said. "Same thing." He looked up. "The aliens." "Gone," Harry said. "The Guardians are going to be in more regular contact. The Corps and Hogwarts are going to have an arrangement." He paused. Dumbledore and Ganthet shook hands before they left. First formal contact between 2 major institutional power structures from separate magical traditions. "And you brokered it," Hermione said, without looking up from her notebook. "I was in the room," Harry said. "You set up the room," she said. "You chose who sat where. You set the terms before they could set them." She looked up. "That's not being in the room. That's running the room." "I was trying to get the outcome that made sense," Harry said. "That's what running the room means," she said, and went back to writing. Ron moved a bishop. A pawn complained loudly and Ron told it to be quiet. "What happens next?" he asked. "With Voldemort." "He's dispersed but not gone," Harry said. "The merger energy scattered what was in Quirrell, but a fragment that survived this long doesn't dissolve from one hit. He'll find another way to reconstitute. It'll take time, years, probably, but he'll be back." He looked at the lake. "When he is, he'll know about the integration. He'll have had years to study it and plan around it. Then we have years to be more prepared than he expects," Ron said, simply. "Yes," Harry said. Hermione had stopped writing. She was looking at Harry with the expression she reserved for things she was about to say that mattered to her. "The Benedictus text," she said. "The confluence theory. I've been reading it all morning." She opened her notebook to a specific page. "He wrote about practitioners with twin-source synthesis. He said, again translating, the greatest danger they face is not from those who would oppose them, but from those who would direct them, who see the synthesis as a resource rather than a person." Harry looked at her. "Dumbledore. And the Guardians," she said. "Both of them today, separately, offered you exactly what you needed in exchange for something they wanted. They weren't being dishonest. They were being what they are. But Benedictus's point is that everyone who encounters what you become is going to have an instinct to use it." "I know," Harry said. "You're 11, she said. Not as a diminishment. As a fact that she was asking him to hold alongside the other facts. "Almost 12, he said. "Harry." He looked at her. She met his eyes with the directness she brought to everything, no softening, no performance, just genuine and present. This was why she mattered, he thought. Not because she agreed with him or celebrated him or followed his lead. Because she looked at what was true and said it. "I know," he said again, differently. "I know that everyone who sees what I can do wants to be the one who points it. I've known that since September. I know that Dumbledore means well and the Guardians mean well and Kilowog means well and they all have shapes they want me to fit." He looked at his wand, at the green gold thread. "But I'm not shaped yet. I'm still becoming the shape." He paused. "I think that's okay." Hermione was quiet for a moment. Then she closed her notebook. "Yes," she said. "That's okay." Ron moved another piece. The White Queen expressed mild satisfaction. "For what it's worth," he said, "from someone who has spent his entire life being the sixth of seven and having everyone else's shape pressed against him, not being the shape they want is extremely inconvenient and also the only thing worth doing." Harry looked at him. "When did you get philosophical?" "Chess does it," Ron said. "You spend enough time seeing the whole board and you start seeing boards everywhere." He looked up. "The thing about chess is the board is fixed. The pieces are fixed. The rules are fixed. And within all of that, every game is completely different." He moved the final piece and the White King tipped over in satisfaction. "You're not the board. You're not the rules. You're not even the pieces. What am I?" Harry said. "The game," Ron said. "The actual game. The part that's different every time and can't be predicted." He picked up his board and began resetting the pieces. "Dumbledore and the Guardians can have the board. You keep being the game." Hermione opened her notebook again and wrote something down, quickly. Harry didn't ask what. He looked at the lake and the reflected clouds and the brilliant May morning, and the ring pulsed steadily on his hand, and the wand was warm in his pocket with its thread of permanent light. The end-of-year feast was a Gryffindor victory. Harry had won them enough Quidditch points to make the House Cup a serious prospect, and then Dumbledore had awarded the end-of-year points for the stone incident with the specific generosity of someone who understood that generosity was sometimes also justice. 50 points each to Harry, Ron, and Hermione, and an additional 10 to Neville for nerve shown in a different way in a different corridor that McGonagall mentioned during the award and refused to elaborate on. The green decorations that had been going up for Slytherin came down and the red went up and the Great Hall erupted in the specific way that genuine surprise compounds genuine joy. Harry watched the hall. He watched the Weasley twins nearly bring the ceiling down. He watched Neville's face when his name was called, round and overwhelmed and something in it that was new, something that hadn't been there in September, a quality of a person who has discovered evidence of themselves. He watched Hermione, who applauded with the contained enthusiasm of someone who had done the maths and known the result for 10 minutes but was letting herself be delighted by it anyway. He watched Ron, who was simply happy, completely and without complication, the way Ron did things. He looked at the high table. Dumbledore was watching him. No chessmaster calculation. No assessment. Just watching, with the smile that Harry had decided was the genuine one, the undeployed one, the smile of a man at a feast who was glad the people around him were glad. Harry raised his goblet very slightly. Dumbledore raised his. McGonagall, seated next to Dumbledore, looked between them with an expression she immediately arranged into neutrality. Harry suspected she was going to mention it to someone later. Snape, at the other end of the table, was eating his pudding with the concentration of a man who had decided the safest place to direct his attention was the pudding. Quirrell's seat was empty. He was in St. Mungo's, where he would be for some time. The prognosis, according to Madame Pomfrey, who had told Harry with the professional neutrality of someone whose job required her to have no personal feelings about patients, was complicated. The occupancy of Voldemort's fragment had left damage that was not entirely physical. Harry thought about Quirrell sometimes, the version that had existed before the turban, before the forest in Albania, before the choice that led to the third floor. He didn't know what that version had been like. He thought about choices, and at what point a choice became a definition, and whether Quirrell had known what he was choosing. He thought he probably had. He thought probably most people know what they're choosing. That didn't make it simple. The train back to London was loud in the way that things are loud when people who have been through something together are finally allowed to be loud about it. The Gryffindor compartment that Harry, Ron, and Hermione occupied filled up and emptied and filled again, because word had gotten around about the stone incident in the week since, in the way that things get around at schools, imprecisely, with embellishment, the core truth present but surrounded by elaboration. Fred and George came by to assess Harry with the evaluative eyes of people who appreciated excellence in chaos and had apparently decided he qualified. Neville came by and stayed, and was quietly included in the easy way that genuine groups include people, no announcement made. At some point Draco Malfoy appeared in the compartment doorway, which he had not done before and which had the quality of something that had been considered for some time. He looked at Harry with an expression that was working to be contemptuous and not quite managing it, because contempt requires certainty and he'd lost a significant amount of his certainty in the flying lesson incident and hadn't fully rebuilt it. "Potter," he said. "Malfoy," Harry said. A pause. Malfoy looked at the ring. He looked at the wand in Harry's hand, at the green gold thread. His expression did something complicated. "There's a rumor," he said, carefully, "that you went through all the protections on the third floor." "Yes," Harry said. "By yourself." "With Ron and Hermione," Harry said. Malfoy absorbed this. His eyes went briefly to Ron and Hermione, who returned his look with varying degrees of interest. Ron was neutral. Hermione was analytical. Neither was hostile, which seemed to discompose Malfoy more than hostility would have. "Voldemort," Malfoy said. "Was he actually? My father says the rumors are exaggerated and, he was there," Harry said. "He's not there anymore." He looked at Malfoy directly. "Whatever your father says about Voldemort, Draco, whatever he tells you about inevitability and power and which side it's safer to be on, he's calculating based on outdated information." Something moved in Malfoy's face. Not anger. Something younger and less certain. "And what's the updated information?" "That Voldemort is dispersed, not gone," Harry said honestly. "That when he reconstitutes, he'll be planning around things your father's generation doesn't know exist. That the landscape is different now and the people who understood it as it was are going to be slower to adapt than the people who've grown up in what it's becoming." He held Malfoy's eyes. "You're smart. You have good instincts under the performance. The question is whether you're going to spend the next 6 years at Hogwarts building something worth having or maintaining a position that was already shaky before the stone incident." The compartment was very quiet. Malfoy looked at him for a long moment. The performance was entirely gone, not replaced by warmth, nothing so immediate as warmth, but replaced by something that was trying to decide what to do in the absence of the script. "I'll think about it," he said, finally. "That's all I'm suggesting," Harry said. Malfoy left. Ron watched the empty doorway for a moment. Was that a recruitment speech? It was a conversation, Harry said. He can do what he wants with it. If he actually thinks about it, Hermione said, he's going to realize that most of what he's been told about power is about to be wrong. Most of it's already wrong, Harry said. The question is when he decides to notice. Ron leaned back. You're going to be insufferable to navigate politically in about 4 years, he said, with deep affection. 3, Hermione said. Fair, Ron agreed. King's Cross Station had the specific quality of an arrival, not an ending, an arrival, the way train journeys end but the traveling doesn't. The platform emptied through the barrier, families reassembling on the other side with the warmth of reunion, trunks trundling, owls expressing opinions about the journey. Harry came through the barrier last, because he'd gone through the train to make sure nothing was left behind, which was a habit from OA where equipment accountability was taken seriously. He had his trunk, his owl Hedwig on her perch, his wand in his hand out of habit, and a ring on his finger carrying its permanent green-gold light. On the other side of the barrier, Molly Weasley was waiting with Arthur and what appeared to be the entire Weasley family, which was a considerable amount of people and noise in one location. She had spotted Harry before he'd fully come through and was already moving toward him with the warm, purposeful momentum of someone who had decided what they were going to do. She hugged him. Not the careful, asking permission hug of someone uncertain about how it would be received, but the full, complete, "You're here and I am glad" hug of someone who had made a decision in November when she wrote the letter and had not revisited it. Harry held the hug for a moment that was longer than polite and shorter than what he actually felt, because he was working on that particular calibration and it was getting easier. "You're coming to us for 3 weeks before term," Molly said, holding him at arm's length to look at him. Her eyes went immediately to the wand and the ring, and then to his face, and the look she gave him had so many layers in it, the things she'd heard, the things she'd read in Ron's letters, the things she'd put together in the way that perceptive parents put things together. She reached up and pushed his hair back from his scar with the matter-of-fact gentleness of someone doing something they decided they were entitled to do, and Harry let her. "Thank you for the letter," he said. "In January." "Of course," she said, with the Weasley-specific warmth that made of course into something substantial. She turned to her family and said, in the voice she used to organize significant numbers of people, "Right, everyone through, the twins are not getting the front seat again." Arthur Weasley appeared at Harry's elbow with the expression of a man who had been waiting to ask something since November and had been exercising great restraint. He looked at the ring. He looked at the wand. He looked at Harry with the specific light in his eyes that he had whenever Muggle things turned out to be more extraordinary than expected. "I have a great many questions," he said, "and Molly has asked me to wait until dinner." "I'll answer all of them at dinner," Harry said. "All of them?" Arthur said. "Every one you have," Harry said. "I have some about electrical plugs in return." Arthur's face did something that looked genuinely like joy. "Oh, excellent," he said. "Excellent." Hermione's parents were waiting, a neat, warm couple who looked at their daughter with the combined relief and pride of parents who had successfully convinced themselves that a magical school was entirely safe and were very glad to see her. Her mother hugged her for a long time. Her father picked up her trunk without being asked. Hermione let herself be hugged with the completeness of someone who had been away for a long time and understood, now, that awayness had a weight. She looked at Harry over her mother's shoulder. She had the expression of someone saying goodbye when they both know goodbye is temporary, which is both easier and harder than the other kind. "I'll write," she said. "About Benedictus. I'm going to the British Library next week to look for anything he might have corresponded with. I'll have the core database access by then," Harry said. "I'll cross-reference whatever you find." "Good," she said. Then, with the slight vulnerability of someone being genuine, "You're going to be all right?" "Yes," Harry said. "Not because of the ring," she said. "I know. I'm asking about the rest of it." He thought about the rest of it. He thought about what the year had been, the castle, the ring's map, the stone, the merger, the guardians. He thought about the Burrows' kitchen clock and Molly Weasley's hug and Dumbledore's genuine smile and Snape's one almost compliment. He thought about the cupboard at Privet Drive, which he was going to pass on the way to the Weasleys and probably not go back to, and the string he'd left behind. Yes, he said again, and it was more specific this time. She nodded. She pulled her trunk through the crowd. He watched her go. Ron appeared at his elbow with the slightly disheveled energy of someone who had survived the initial Weasley reunion chaos and emerged relatively intact. "Mum's got the car," he said. "Fred and George are arguing about who sits in the back. Dad's asking Percy about his prefect badge again." He looked at Harry. "You ready?" Harry looked at the station. At the families and the trunks and the owls and the noise. At the barrier to platforms 9 and 10, solid now, ordinary, just a wall. At the sign above it that said nothing unusual because there was nothing unusual to say, because the unusual thing was the train and the school and what happened there, and what happened there was done for the summer, packed and carried and ongoing. He thought about what waited in the next year. The database access. Benedictus and confluence theory and whatever Hermione found at the British Library. The ring's integration, still uncharted, still producing things the ring classified as undefined. Voldemort dispersed but patient, reconstituting somewhere that the ring's sector mapping hadn't located yet, planning around information he hadn't fully had when last they met. He thought about second year. About what it would be, now that the first year had established certain things as facts, that he was not going to hide, not going to pretend, not going to perform the modest surprised boy that the wizarding world had been expecting. That he had allies, genuine ones, Ron and Hermione and Snape's reluctant respect and Dumbledore's recalibrated partnership and Kilowog's faith from 52,000 light-years away. He thought about what Ron had said. "You're the game. The actual game. The part that's different every time." He picked up his trunk. "Ready," he said. They went through the crowd together, and the ring glowed its permanent green gold, and the wand was warm in his pocket, and the station noise was enormous and full of people who were glad and going somewhere, and Harry Potter, Green Lantern of Sector 2814, student of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, son of James and Lily, friend of Ron and Hermione, reader of stars, measurer of cupboards, maker of galaxies, walked out into the summer. Somewhere above England, in the upper atmosphere where the air is thin and cold and the curve of the planet is just visible if you know how to look, the ring's long-range sensors were running their continuous sector sweep. They had been running it since September. They would run it through the summer, through the years ahead, through whatever the next thing turned out to be. The sweep was routine. It mapped. It logged. It filed. And every few minutes, in the background of everything else it was doing, it returned to the same piece of data it had been monitoring since the night in the stone chamber, the dispersal pattern of Voldemort's fragment, tracked through the magical architecture of Western Europe like smoke through a house, thin and cold and still present, gathering itself with the patience of something that had nothing left but patience. The ring logged it. It added the new data to the existing model. It updated the reconstitution timeline estimate, years still, 2 at minimum, possibly 3. Then it returned its primary attention to its lantern, walking across a crowded station toward a family that had put his name on their clock, and it registered something in his emotional state that it had logged with increasing frequency over the past year: satisfaction. Clean, unperformed, genuine. The satisfaction of someone who is who they are, doing what they do, going somewhere worth going. The ring categorized it under willpower. It always had. It always would. In brightest day, in blackest night, no evil shall escape my sight. Let those who worship evils might beware my power, Green Lantern's light.